Story 1. I was cutting vegetables when my daughter tugged my arm. "Daddy, can I stop taking the pills Grandma gives me?" My blood ran cold. My mother-in-law always said they were good for her. Trying not to panic, I told my daughter to bring me the bottle. When the doctor checked it, his face turned ghost white. He slammed the bottle on the table and shouted, "Do you know what this is? Why is she taking this? Who gave it to her, and why?" The late afternoon sun filtered through the kitchen window of the small two-bedroom apartment, casting pale rectangles of light across the worn linoleum floor. Kevin Ward stood at the counter, the rhythmic sound of his knife against the cutting board filling the quiet space. Carrots first, then celery, then the bell pepper he grabbed on sale at the grocery store that morning. He moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd learned to cook out of necessity rather than passion. Behind him, Leia hummed softly as she arranged her collection of toy animals on the living room carpet. 5 years old, with her mother's dark curls and his own gray-green eyes, she'd been building an elaborate zoo for the past 20 minutes. Kevin glanced over his shoulder, watching her place a plastic giraffe next to a stuffed elephant. Her small hands moving with careful deliberation. Pineford, Minnesota, wasn't much of town. Population barely cracking 4,000. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did, where the diner on Main Street still served coffee and chipped mugs and the hardware store closed at 5 on the dot. Kevin had grown up here, left for college in Minneapolis, and returned when Claire got pregnant. They planned to stay just a few years, save money, then move somewhere with better opportunities. That was 7 years ago. 2 years ago, Claire had been driving home from her shift at the elementary school when a pickup truck ran a red light at the intersection of Highway 71 and Pine Avenue. The doctors said she wouldn't have felt anything. Kevin didn't find much comfort in that. "Daddy." He turned, knife still in hand. Leia stood at the edge of the kitchen, one small hand gripping the doorframe, her expression uncertain. "Yes, sweetheart." She shifted her weight from foot to foot, a gesture he recognized as nervousness. "Can I ask you something?" Kevin set down the knife and wiped his hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle. "Of course. What's up?" Leia took a step closer, then another, until she was standing right beside him. She reached up and tugged gently on his sleeve, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "Can I stop taking the pills Grandma gives me?" Kevin felt something cold settle in his stomach. He crouched down until they were eye level, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "What pills, honey?" "The white ones." Ila's eyes were wide, earnest. "She says, they help me be calm. But Daddy, they make me so sleepy even when it's not bedtime." The cold feeling spread through Kevin's chest. He kept his voice steady even as his pulse began to hammer in his ears. "When does Grandma give you these pills?" "When she picks me up from kindergarten on Wednesdays and sometimes on Saturdays when she visits." Ila's lower lip trembled slightly. "I don't like them. They make everything feel fuzzy." Kevin's mind raced. Donna Halberg, Claire's mother, had been visiting regularly since the funeral. At first, Kevin had been grateful for the help. She'd pick Leia up from school when his shifts at the county planning office ran late, watch her on occasional weekends, bring over casseroles and side dishes when Kevin was too tired to cook. But over time, the help had started to feel less like assistance and more like interference. Donna had opinions about everything. The way Kevin dressed Leia, the food he fed her, the bedtime he'd established. She'd been a nursing aide for 30 years before retiring, and she wielded that experience like a badge of authority, constantly suggesting vitamins, supplements, dietary changes. Kevin had largely ignored it, writing it off as a grandmother's overprotectiveness, trying to keep the peace for Leia's sake. But this was different. This was medicine. "Leia," Kevin said carefully, "do you know where these pills are right now?" She nodded. "In my backpack. Grandma puts them in a little bottle and tells her to keep them safe." Kevin stood up, his jaw tight. "Can you show me?" Leia led him to the front closet where her purple backpack hung on a low hook. She unzipped the front pocket and pulled out a small amber prescription bottle, the kind you'd get from any pharmacy. Kevin took it from her, his hand steady despite the anger beginning to build in his chest. The label was printed clearly. Donna Halberg. Lorazepam 1 gram. Take as needed for anxiety. Kevin stared at the bottle. Lorazepam. He wasn't a doctor, but he heard of it. It was a benzodiazepine, an anti-anxiety medication, an adult medication. And his 5-year-old daughter had been taking it. He unscrewed the cap and counted the pills. 8 left. The prescription had been filled 3 weeks ago for 30 tablets. That meant 22 were gone. "How many does Grandma give you at a time?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. "Just one," Leia said. "But sometimes twice in one day if she says I'm being difficult." Kevin felt his vision narrow the way it did when he was trying very hard not to lose control. He took a slow breath, then another. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "You're not in trouble, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong, but I need you to get your shoes on. We're going to see a doctor." Leia's eyes widened. "Am I sick?" "No," Kevin said firmly, pulling her into a quick hug. "But I want to make sure you're okay. That's all." 20 minutes later, they were in his aging Honda Civic, driving toward the urgent care clinic on the north side of town. Leia sat in her booster seat, kicking her feet against the back of the passenger seat, humming a song from one of her shows. Kevin kept one hand on the wheel and the other gripping the prescription bottle, his knuckles white. The waiting room was nearly empty when they arrived. A teenage boy with a badly sprained ankle sat with his mother in one corner and an elderly man dozed in a chair by the magazine rack. Kevin approached the front desk where a young woman with bright red hair looked up from her computer. "Hi, I need someone to look at my daughter as soon as possible." "What's the emergency?" she asked, reaching for a clipboard. Kevin set the pill bottle on the counter. "Someone's been giving her medication without my knowledge or permission. I need to know if she's in danger." The receptionist's expression changed immediately. She picked up the phone. "Let me get the doctor." Within 10 minutes, they were in an exam room. Dr. Harding arrived shortly after. A man in his early 50s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Kevin knew him by reputation. He treated half the kids in Pineford at one point or another, and he had a reputation for being thorough and unflappable. But when Kevin handed him the pill bottle and explained the situation, Dr. Harding's calm demeanor cracked. He stared at the label, then at Leia, then back at Kevin. "You're telling me someone's been giving your 5-year-old daughter lorazepam?" "Her grandmother," Kevin said tightly. "Without my knowledge." Dr. Harding's jaw clenched. He turned to Leia, who was sitting on the examination table swinging her legs. "Hi there. I'm Dr. Harding. I'm going to ask you some questions and check a few things." "Okay." Ela nodded. The examination took 30 minutes. Dr. Harding was thorough, checking her heart rate, her reflexes, her breathing. He asked her gentle questions about how she'd been feeling, whether she'd experienced any dizziness or nausea, whether she'd had trouble waking up in the mornings. When it was over, he gestured for Kevin to step outside the room. They stood in the hallway, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. "Kevin," Dr. Harding said quietly, "this is a sedative used primarily for adult anxiety disorders and certain neurological conditions. In higher doses, it's used pre-surgery. A child Leia's age should never under any circumstances be taking this medication." Kevin's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Is she in danger?" "She's showing mild symptoms. Lethargy, slower reaction times, some cognitive fogginess, but she's young and resilient. The good news is that if she stops taking it now, these effects should reverse." Dr. Harding paused, his expression grave. "However, if she'd continued taking it, or if the dosage had been increased, we'd be looking at serious respiratory issues, potential developmental delays, and significant risks to her central nervous system." Kevin felt the anger surge through him like a physical force. He pressed his palms against the wall, trying to steady himself. Who would do this to a 5-year-old child? "The bigger question," Dr. Harding replied, "is why? This isn't just negligence, Kevin. This is deliberate. Someone made a conscious choice to give your daughter prescription medication without your consent." Kevin turned to look at the doctor. "I need you to document everything. Write it all down. I need an official record." Dr. Harding nodded slowly. "I'll prepare a full report. And Kevin, I'm required by law to report this. You understand that, right?" "Good," Kevin said. "Report it." They drove home in silence. Leia fell asleep in her car seat before they even left the parking lot. Her head lolling to one side, her breathing slow and deep, too deep for a child her age. After a late afternoon nap, Kevin carried her inside and laid her gently on her bed. He removed her shoes, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and sat down in the chair beside her bed. The same chair he'd sat in when she'd had nightmares after Claire died. The same chair he'd occupied through countless bedtime stories and whispered conversations about missing mommy. He watched her sleep, his mind racing. Donna had done this deliberately. She'd taken prescription medication meant for herself and given it to a child. She'd lied to Leia, telling her the pills would help her be calm. She'd put his daughter at risk. Why? Kevin had tolerated Donna's interference because he'd thought it came from a place of grief and concern. Claire had been her only daughter. Losing her had broken something in Donna, just as it had broken something in him. He'd made allowances, tried to be understanding, tried to maintain a connection for Ela's sake. But this crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He stayed beside Leia's bed until well past midnight, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, listening to the soft sounds of her breathing. She slept too soundly, too still, like something precious being slowly drained of life. Kevin made himself a promise in that quiet darkness. He was done being polite. He was done making allowances. Donna had endangered his child, and he would not let that stand. When he finally rose from the chair and walked to his own bedroom, his mind was already working through his next steps. He wouldn't act rashly. He wouldn't confront her in anger. It would be deliberate, strategic, and absolutely unyielding, because this wasn't about forgiveness or family unity or keeping the peace. This was about protecting his daughter, and Kevin would do whatever it took. The next morning was Sunday. Kevin woke early, made breakfast, and waited until Leia was settled in front of the television with her cartoons before he got in his car and drove to Donna's house. She lived in a small ranch-style home on Birchwood Lane, a neat beige structure with white trim and a well-maintained lawn. Claire had grown up in that house. Kevin had spent countless dinners there during their dating years, holidays and birthdays and ordinary Sundays. He'd sat at that kitchen table and asked Donna's permission to marry her daughter. Now, as he pulled into the driveway, all he felt was cold determination. Donna answered the door wearing a cardigan and slippers. Her gray hair pulled back in a loose bun. She smiled when she saw him, the same soft grandmotherly smile she always wore. "Kevin, this is a surprise. Is Lila with you?" "No," Kevin said. "I need to talk to you." Something flickered in Donna's expression, but the smile stayed in place. "Of course. Come in. We can talk here," Kevin said, not moving from the front step. The smile faltered slightly. "What's this about? You look upset. You gave Lila sedatives." The words hung in the air between them. Donna's expression froze, her eyes widening just a fraction before she regained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Donna." Kevin's voice was quiet, controlled. "I found the bottle in her backpack." "Lorazepam, your prescription? 22 pills gone in 3 weeks." Donna's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Kevin, I think you're confused. I may have given her some mild calming supplements, something natural, but stop lying." The sharpness in his voice made her flinch. The soft grandmother mask slipped just for a moment, and Kevin saw something else underneath, something colder. "Well," Donna said, her tone shifting, becoming defensive. "Ela has been difficult lately. More emotional, more resistant. You don't always see it because you're at work. I'm just trying to help manage her behavior. You should be grateful." Kevin stared at her. "You could have harmed her. Do you understand that? You could have seriously hurt my daughter." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Donna said, waving a hand dismissively. "I raised 2 children. I worked in healthcare for 30 years. I know exactly what I'm doing. A small dose of a mild sedative is nothing to panic over." "A small dose?" Kevin's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. "She's 5 years old, Donna. That medication isn't approved for children. Dr. Harding said she could have developed respiratory problems, cognitive issues." "Dr. Harding is overly cautious," Donna interrupted. "These doctors today, they're all so paranoid about everything. Back when I was working, we had common sense about these things." Kevin felt a strange detachment settle over him, as if he were watching the conversation from somewhere outside his own body. He studied Donna's face, the tight set of her mouth, the defensive angle of her shoulders, the complete absence of guilt or remorse in her eyes. This wasn't a grandmother who'd made a mistake. This was someone who believed she'd done nothing wrong. "You're not to come near Leia again," Kevin said quietly. Donna's expression hardened. "Excuse me? You heard me. No visits, no phone calls, no contact of any kind." "You can't do that," Donna said, her voice rising. "She's my granddaughter. I have a right." "You have no rights." Kevin cut her off. "You forfeited them when you decided to drug a child. How dare you?" Donna's face flushed red. "I've been there for you since Claire died. I've helped you, supported you, done everything I could for that little girl, and this is how you repay me." Kevin looked at her for a long moment. Really looked at her behind the indignation and the wounded grandmother act. He saw something he'd been too grief-stricken to notice before. A calculating quality, a coldness that had nothing to do with loss or love. He turned and walked back to his car without another word. Behind him, Donna called out, "You're making a mistake, Kevin. You need me. You can't do this alone." But Kevin was already in the driver's seat, starting the engine, pulling away from the house where his wife had grown up. He didn't look back. The following week passed in a strange, tense quiet. Kevin took Leia to school himself, picked her up himself, rearranged his work schedule to eliminate any gaps that Donna might try to fill. He watched his daughter carefully, noting the gradual changes. She seemed more alert, more energetic. Her teacher mentioned that she'd been more engaged in class, more talkative during group activities. The medication was leaving her system. But Kevin couldn't shake the questions that circled endlessly through his mind during those long evenings after Leia went to bed. He'd sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, turning the prescription bottle over in his hands, trying to understand why would Donna do this. The answer came from an unexpected source. On Wednesday afternoon, Kevin received a call at work from a woman named Patricia Clean. She introduced herself as a laboratory technician at MedTech Research, a private pharmaceutical research facility on the outskirts of Pineford. Kevin knew the place vaguely. It was a small operation, mostly conducting clinical trials and long-term studies for larger pharmaceutical companies. "Mr. Ward," Patricia said, her voice hesitant. "I'm not sure if I should be making this call, but I've been thinking about something for weeks, and after what I heard happened, I felt I had to reach out." "What did you hear?" Kevin asked carefully. "About Donna Halberg, about the medication. I work with her sometimes. She does volunteer consulting for our facility. Data analysis mostly, but Mr. Ward, there's something you should know." Kevin's grip tightened on the phone. "Go on." Patricia took a breath. "For the past 3 months, Donna's been bringing in documentation, detailed logs about a child's reactions to calming medications, sleep patterns, behavioral changes, cognitive responses. We pay participants for long-term observational data, especially for medications where we're tracking extended use patterns. It's usually adult volunteers who sign consent forms. But Donna claimed she had full authorization." The office seemed to tilt around. "Kevin, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Patricia replied quietly, "that Donna was being paid to document a child's response to sedative medication. She told us she had parental permission. She submitted forms with signatures. We assumed everything was legitimate." Kevin's vision narrowed to a single point. "She was collecting data on my daughter. I can't prove it was your daughter specifically, but the timeline matches. And when I heard about what happened about the medication being discovered, I realized." Patricia's voice cracked slightly. "Mr. Ward, I'm so sorry. I should have questioned it more carefully. But Donna seemed so professional, so knowledgeable. She'd bring in these detailed notes about dosage, timing, and behavioral observations. We pay $500 per month for complete data sets. $500 a month." Kevin set the phone down on his desk and pressed his palms against his eyes. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. This wasn't about helping Leia be calm. This wasn't about managing difficult behavior. This wasn't even about some misguided grandmotherly concern. Donna had been using his daughter as a research subject. She'd been drugging a 5-year-old child and documenting the effects for money. "Mr. Ward." Patricia's voice came through the phone speaker. "Are you still there?" Kevin picked up the receiver. His voice came out steady, almost calm. "I need you to save every piece of documentation you have, every log, every payment record, every form Donna submitted. Can you do that?" "Yes," Patricia said immediately. "Yes, I can. And I need you to write down exactly what you just told me. Dates, amounts, everything." "I will." "Mr. Ward, I'm truly sorry. If I'd known, you didn't know," Kevin said. "But you know now, and you're doing the right thing by telling me." After he hung up, Kevin sat motionless at his desk for several minutes. Around him, his coworkers typed and shuffled papers and discussed zoning regulations and building permits. Normal work, normal concerns, normal lives. His world had just shifted on its axis. Donna hadn't crossed a line out of ignorance or grief or even misguided concern. She'd done it deliberately, systematically for profit. She'd looked at her granddaughter and seen dollar signs. Kevin stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked to his supervisor's office. "I need to take the rest of the day off. Family emergency." By 5 o'clock, he was sitting across from Dr. Harding again, this time without Leia. The doctor listened to Kevin's explanation of Patricia's call, his expression growing grimmer with each sentence. "That changes everything," Dr. Harding said when Kevin finished. "This isn't just inappropriate medication use. This is human subjects research without proper consent, approval or oversight and using a child." He shook his head. "Kevin, you need to involve law enforcement." "I know," Kevin said, "but I need documentation first. Evidence. I need this to be airtight." Dr. Harding pulled out a folder. "I've completed my formal report on Leia's condition and the inappropriate medication use. This includes my professional opinion that the medication posed serious risks to her health and development. I'll submit this to Child Protective Services, but you should also take a copy to the police." Kevin took the folder. "Thank you. There's something else." Dr. Harding added, "If what this woman at MedTech said is true, If Donna forged documents claiming parental authorization, that's fraud. That's forgery. Combined with the child endangerment charges. She's looking at serious criminal penalties. Kevin nodded slowly. He felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, only a cold, resolute certainty about what needed to happen next. I'm going to make sure she's held accountable, Kevin said. For all of it. Good, Dr. Harding replied. Your daughter deserves that. They all do. Over the next week, Kevin moved with quiet precision. He didn't confront Donna again. He didn't warn her what was coming. He simply gathered evidence piece by piece, building an undeniable case. Patricia provided copies of every document Donna had submitted to MedTech research. The logs were damning detailed observations of Subject L's responses to medication, complete with dates, times, dosages, and behavioral notes. The writing was clinical, detached, treating Leia not as a child but as a data point. Subject L exhibited increased drowsiness within 45 minutes of 1 gram dose. Reduced activity level observed. Compliance with instructions markedly improved. Second dose administered same day due to resistant behavior. Subject became noticeably lethargic. Sleep onset within 2 hours. Week 3. Subject showing consistent response pattern. Minimal adverse effects noted. Continued documentation recommended. Kevin read each entry. His jaw clenched. Fighting the rage that threatened to overwhelm his careful planning. He found more evidence in unexpected places. While picking up some of Hila's belongings that she'd left at Donna's house. A calculated move. Using Yaya's forgotten jacket as an excuse to enter the home, he managed to photograph a small notebook in Donna's study. The notebook contained handwritten notes matching the logs submitted to MedTech along with calculations of monthly earnings and reminders about data submission deadlines. There was even a voice message saved on Donna's phone. Kevin had convinced her to let him use her phone to call his own phone because the battery had died. Where she'd left herself a reminder. Extra income deposited. Finish weekly report on L's sleep patterns. Next submission due Friday. Extra income. That's what his daughter had been to her grandmother. Extra income. When Kevin finally walked into the Pioneer Police Department, he carried a folder 3 in thick. Detective James Rivera, a stocky man in his 40s with kind eyes and a reputation for thoroughness, listened to Kevin's explanation without interruption. Then he spread the contents of the folder across his desk: Dr. Harding's medical report, Patricia's written statement, copies of the logs, photographs of Donna's notes, the prescription bottle, records of MedTech, his payment schedule. Detective Rivera studied each document carefully. When he finally looked up, his expression was hard. Mr. Ward, I'm going to be very clear with you. What you've described and what this evidence supports constitutes multiple serious crimes. Child endangerment, administering medication without authorization, fraud, forgery. If she signed documents claiming to be your daughter's guardian, that's a felony. And if she was conducting unauthorized research on a minor, he shook his head. We're going to need to interview everyone involved. The woman at MedTech, your daughter's doctor, possibly even your daughter herself, though we'll do that very carefully given her age. Whatever you need, Kevin said. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. Detective Rivera nodded. I'll be honest with you. Cases like this, they're tricky. Family dynamics, grandparents claiming good intentions, defense attorneys arguing miscommunication. But this evidence, he tapped the folder. This is substantial, especially the forged authorization documents. That's going to be very hard for her to explain away. When will you arrest her? Kevin asked. I need to consult with the prosecutor's office first. Get arrest warrant issued. Given the evidence, I'd expect that to happen within 48 hours. Detective Rivera paused. Mr. Ward, I have to ask, does M. Halberg know you've discovered all of this? Is there any chance she might destroy evidence or flee? She knows I found the pills, Kevin said. She knows I told her to stay away from Leia, but she doesn't know about the rest. She doesn't know I've gathered documentation or that I'm aware of the research program. Good. Let's keep it that way. The arrest happened on Tuesday morning. Kevin didn't witness it. Detective Rivera advised him to stay away, maintain distance, avoid anything that might complicate the case. But neighbors reported what happened and word spread through Pineford within hours. 2 officers arrived at Donna's home at 7:30 in the morning. She answered the door in her bathrobe, confused at first, then increasingly agitated as they explained the warrant. She tried to argue, insisting there was some mistake, some misunderstanding, demanding to speak to her lawyer. But the officers were professional, firm, unyielding. They placed the handcuffs on her wrists while she stood in her own doorway, still protesting. This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything wrong. This is all Kevin's doing. He's tried to turn everyone against me. "Ma'am," one of the officers said quietly, "you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise that right." But Donna couldn't stop talking, couldn't stop justifying, explaining, minimizing. "It's just data collection. Everyone participates in medical research. It's perfectly legal. I had permission." "From whom, ma'am?" From her father. "I had authorization. We have copies of the documents you submitted, Miss Hallberg. The signature doesn't match Mr. Ward's signature on file." That finally seemed to silence her. They drove her to the county jail, processed her, photographed her, fingerprinted her, set her bail at $50,000. Kevin heard all of this from Detective Rivera later that day. He sat in his living room after picking Leia up from kindergarten, holding the phone to his ear, listening to the details with a strange sense of detachment. "She's claiming ignorance." Detective Rivera says she thought the forms were legitimate, that she misunderstood the authorization requirements, that she was only trying to help her daughter. Her attorney is already working on a defense of good intentions and procedural misunderstanding. "Will it work?" Kevin asked. "Not with this evidence," Detective Rivera replied. "The forged signature, the detailed logs, the payments, the notebook calculations, it all points to deliberate, systematic behavior. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned." "What happens next?" "Arraignment hearing in 2 weeks. She'll formally plead. Given the charges and the evidence, the prosecutor is confident we'll get an indictment. After that, it goes to trial unless she accepts a plea deal. And if she goes to trial, then we present everything, all the evidence, all the witnesses. And Mr. Ward," Detective Rivera's voice softened slightly, "you may be called to testify. So, might your daughter, though, we'll try to avoid that if possible." Kevin looked across the room to where Yaya sat on the couch, coloring in her favorite book, humming softly to herself. She seemed brighter now, more present, more herself. The foggy lethargy that had characterized the past few months was gone. "Whatever it takes," Kevin said. "I'll do whatever it takes." The weeks following Donna's arrest brought a strange new rhythm to Kevin's life. He continued working, taking Leia to school, maintaining the routines that gave their day structure and safety. But underneath the ordinary surface, he felt the constant weight of what was coming. The legal process grinding forward, pulling his family's private trauma into public view. Leia asked about her grandmother only once. They were eating dinner, spaghetti with meatballs, Leia's favorite. When she looked up from twirling noodles on her fork and said, "Daddy, is Grandma sick?" Kevin set down his own fork carefully. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because she hasn't visited. And usually when people don't visit, it's because they're sick. Like when Mommy was in the hospital." Kevin felt his throat tighten. Leia had been 3 when Claire died, and her memories of that time were fragmented, confused. She remembered the hospital, the hushed conversations, the adults crying. She'd asked about Mommy every day for months afterward, and Kevin had answered as honestly as he could without crushing her with the full weight of death. Now, he chose his words with the same careful precision. "Grandma isn't sick," he said gently. "But she made some mistakes. She did things that weren't safe, things that could have hurt you. So, she's not going to be visiting for a while, maybe for a long time." Leia considered this, her young face serious. "Is it because of the pills?" Kevin's chest itched. "Yes, baby. It's because of the pills." "Okay," Leia said simply. Then she went back to her spaghetti, apparently satisfied with the explanation. Children, Kevin thought, had a remarkable capacity for accepting the truth when it was given to them clearly. It was adults who complicated things, who layered on justifications and excuses and rationalizations until the truth became unrecognizable. The investigation expanded in ways Kevin hadn't anticipated. MedTech research came under scrutiny from the state medical board. Investigators discovered that the company's protocols for participant recruitment and authorization verification were dangerously lax. Patricia's testimony revealed that Donna had been submitting data for months before anyone questioned the legitimacy of the consent forms. The facility's director, Dr. Nathan Price, insisted that they trusted Donna's credentials and experience, that she'd been a valued consultant for years. But under examination, Dr. Price's confidence crumbled. It became clear that MedTech had been cutting corners, accepting participants without proper vetting, paying for data without adequate oversight. The facility's license was suspended pending a full review. Kevin learned these details from Detective Rivera, who called regularly with updates. The detective had become something of an ally, his professional demeanor occasionally giving way to genuine concern for Leia's well-being. "The prosecutor wants to meet with you," Detective Rivera said during one of these calls. "Her name is Amanda Cross. She's handling the case personally because of the child endangerment component. She's very good, Mr. Ward. Very thorough. Kevin met Amanda Cross on a gray Thursday afternoon in her office at the county courthouse. She was a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that Kevin appreciated immediately. "Mr. Ward," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "Thank you for coming in. I reviewed all the evidence Detective Rivera collected, and I want you to understand that we're taking this case very seriously. What happened to your daughter was a violation of trust, of basic human decency, and of multiple laws." They sat across from each other at a conference table covered with documents. Amanda spread several folders out, organizing them with practiced efficiency. "I need to walk you through what we're charging her with," Amanda continued. "First, child endangerment. That's a felony in this state given the potential for serious harm. Second, administering prescription medication without authorization. Third, fraud. She accepted payment for research participation under false pretenses. Fourth, forgery. She signed her name on authorization documents, and fifth, conducting unauthorized human subjects research on a minor." Kevin listened, his hands folded on the table in front of him, his expression neutral. "The defense attorney," Amanda said, "is already preparing their strategy. They're going to argue that Miss Halber believed she was helping her daughter, that she misunderstood the authorization requirements, that the medication wasn't actually harmful. They'll paint her as a concerned grandmother who made an error in judgment. But that's not what happened," Kevin said quietly. "No." Amanda agreed. "It's not. And we have the evidence to prove it. The detailed logs, the payment records, the calculations in her personal notebook, all of that demonstrates premeditation and intent. But I need you to understand that this is going to be difficult. Juries don't like convicting grandmothers. They want to believe in good intentions. We'll need to be very clear, very precise, and very compelling. What do you need from me? Your testimony will be crucial. You'll need to describe your relationship with Miss Hallberg, the access she had to your daughter, how you discovered the medication. I'll also need you to be prepared for difficult questions. The defense will try to suggest that you're being vindictive, that you're overreacting because of unresolved grief about your wife's death." Kevin's jaw tightened. "Let them try." Amanda studied him for a moment. "Mr. Ward, I can see that you're angry. That's understandable. But when you testify, I need you to be calm, measured, factual. Anger can read as instability. I need the jury to see you as a protective father who made rational decisions to safeguard his child." "I can do that," Kevin said. "Good." Amanda pulled out another folder. "Now, there's something else you should know. Miss Hallberg's attorney has approached us about a plea deal." Kevin's attention sharpened. "What kind of deal?" "They're offering to plead guilty to the medication charge in exchange for dropping the other counts. She'd serve 18 months, possibly less with good behavior." The room was very quiet. Kevin could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the distant sound of voices in the hallway outside. "No," he said. Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Ward, I understand your feelings, but 18 months of actual prison time is not insignificant." "No," Kevin repeated. His voice was calm, steady, but absolutely certain. "She doesn't get a plea down. She doesn't get to avoid accountability. She endangered my daughter from money. She forged legal documents. She treated a child like a research animal. I want every charge prosecuted. I want a trial." Amanda held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "All right, I'll inform the defense that we're rejecting the plea offer. Thank you." As Kevin stood to leave, Amanda said quietly, "Mr. Ward, most people in your position would take the plea. They'd want the certainty, the closure, avoiding the stress of a trial, but I respect your decision, and I promise you, we'll make sure the jury understands exactly what she did." The trial was scheduled for late April, for months after Donna's arrest. In the intervening time, Kevin focused on rebuilding Leia's sense of security and normalcy. They established new routines, new traditions. Movie nights every Friday with popcorn and her choice of film. Weekend hikes at the state park where Leia loved identifying birds and collecting interesting rocks. Bedtime stories that Kevin made up himself featuring a brave girl hero who solved mysteries and helped people. Lilac thrived. Her teacher reported that she was doing excellent work in class, making friends, participating enthusiastically in activities. The shadows that had characterized those drug months were gone. But Kevin remained vigilant. He kept the prescription bottle in a locked box in his bedroom. Evidence preserved for the trial. He maintained detailed records of Leia's recovery, sleep patterns, energy levels, behavioral observations. He documented everything, creating a stark contrast between the foggy, lethargic child Donna had been creating and the bright, energetic daughter who had emerged. One evening, Kevin received an unexpected visitor. He answered the knock on his door to find a man in his 60s, tall and thin, with weathered features and uncertain eyes. Mr. Ward, my name is Paul Halberg. I was married to Donna. Kevin knew who he was. Claire's father, Yaya's other grandfather. The man had left when Claire was 12, divorcing Donna and moving to Oregon. Kevin had met him only twice, at the wedding and at Claire's funeral. What do you want? Kevin asked, not unkindly, but not warmly either. Paul shifted uncomfortably. I heard about what happened about the arrest. I know I have no right to be here, but I wanted to. I needed to tell you something. Kevin studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. Come in. They sat in the living room. Leia already asleep in her bedroom. Paul declined the offer of coffee, sitting on the edge of the couch with his hands clasped between his knees. I left Anna 23 years ago. Paul began because I realized she wasn't who I thought she was. When Claire was young, maybe 7 or 8, Donna started making her sick. Kevin felt his blood run cold. What? Not obviously. Not dramatically, just little things. Giving her medicine when she didn't need it. Keeping her home from school with vague illnesses. Taking her to doctor after doctor, seeking diagnosis. I didn't understand what was happening at first. I thought Donna was just being overprotective, overly concerned. Paul's voice was heavy with old regret. Then I caught her giving Claire medication that had been prescribed for me, something for my back pain. She was giving it to Claire and telling the doctor that Claire was having unexplained discomfort. Kevin's hands clenched on the armrest of his chair. I confronted her. Paul continued, asked her what the hell she was doing, and she looked at me like I was being unreasonable. Said she was documenting Claire's symptoms for medical research, that doctors needed long-term data, that she was being paid for detailed health journals. He laughed bitterly. I took Claire and left. Filed for divorce, fought like hell for custody, but Donna was smart. She had a good reputation in the medical community, lots of professional connections. The court gave her primary custody, and I only got summer visitation. Why didn't you tell someone? Kevin asked, his voice tight. I did. I told lawyers, social workers, anyone who'd listened, but I had no proof, just suspicions and concerns. And Donna was very good at playing the victim, at painting me as an unstable ex-husband, making accusations out of spite. Paul met Kevin's eyes. When Claire chose to stay with Donna after she turned 16, when she shut me out of her life, I figured Donna had poisoned her against me. I tried to warn her when she got pregnant with Leia. Tried to tell her to be careful to watch for signs, but Claire didn't want to hear it. She thought I was bitter about the divorce. Kevin sat back in his chair processing this information. Claire never mentioned any of this. She probably didn't remember most of it. Donna stopped after I left, stopped making her sick. Claire just remembered that I'd abandoned her, that her mother had been there. Paul's voice cracked. And now Donna did the same thing to my granddaughter. History repeating itself. And this time, someone actually stopped her. They sat in silence for a long moment. I'm testifying at the trial. Paul said, finally, the prosecutor contacted me. I'm going to tell them everything, even though it's old, even though I don't have proof. Maybe it'll help show a pattern. Maybe the jury will understand that this wasn't a one-time mistake. Thank you, Kevin said quietly. Don't thank me. I should have done more years ago. Should have fought harder. Maybe if I had, Claire would have seen the truth. Maybe she'd still be. Paul trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Kevin walked him to the door. Before leaving, Paul turned back. You're doing the right thing, Mr. Ward. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. That little girl needs someone willing to protect her. Someone who won't compromise or back down. I won't, Kevin said. I promise you that. As the trial date approached, Kevin received a call from an investigator working for the prosecution. Her name was Sophie Turner, and she specialized in cases involving medical fraud and child welfare. Mr. Ward, Sophie said, I've been digging into Ms. Hallberg's background and I found some interesting information. She was fired from 3 different healthcare facilities over the course of her career. Kevin sat forward. Fired for what? The official records are vague. Protocol violations, unauthorized procedures, patient privacy concerns. But I spoke to some former colleagues off the record. One of them told me that Donna had a pattern of conducting unofficial observations on patients without proper consent. She'd document their responses to medications, track their symptoms, compile data. Sometimes she'd adjust dosages without authorization, claiming she was optimizing treatment. Why wasn't she reported to the medical board? She was twice. But the complaints were difficult to substantiate. She'd claimed she was following standard care protocols, that the patients had given verbal consent, that the documentation was for quality improvement purposes. The facilities would settle with disgruntled families, fire her quietly, and that would be the end of it. So, she's been doing this for years, it appears so. And based on what I'm seeing, she got more careful over time, more subtle, using her own family members where questions of consent were murkier, where she could claim she was acting as a concerned relative rather than a medical professional. Kevin felt a cold rage settle over him. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was who Donna was. Someone who saw people as objects, as data sources, as means to an end. Will this be admissible in court? Kevin asked. The prosecutor is arguing that it establishes a pattern of behavior, evidence of intent. The defense will try to exclude it as prejudicial, but Judge Thompson is pretty strict about allowing relevant background information. I think we have a good chance. When Kevin hung up the phone, he sat for a long time staring at nothing. Claire had grown up with this woman, had been raised by someone capable of treating children as research subjects. Kevin wondered how much of Claire's quiet sadness, her occasional withdrawn moods, had been shaped by growing up in that environment. He wondered what scars she'd carried that he'd never fully understood. And he felt a deep, fierce gratitude that Leah would never have to wonder because he was going to make absolutely certain that Donna Halberg faced the full consequences of her actions. The courtroom was smaller than Kevin had expected, almost intimate in its dimensions. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lighting, rows of benches for spectators. He sat behind the prosecution table with Leah's stuffed owl in his jacket pocket, a small reminder of what he was fighting for. Jury selection had taken 2 days. The final panel consisted of 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from their late 20s to early 70s. Kevin watched them carefully during the opening statements, trying to read their expressions, their body language, their reactions to the evidence being outlined. Amanda Cross stood before them, her voice clear and measured. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about trust, about the sacred bond between a grandparent and a grandchild, about what happens when that trust is violated in the most fundamental way possible. She paused, letting the words settle. Donna Halberg didn't make a mistake. She didn't have a lapse in judgment. She made a calculated, deliberate decision to use her own granddaughter as an unwitting participant in medical research, administering prescription medication without consent or authorization, documenting the effects and accepting payment for the data she collected. She turned a 5-year-old child into a source of income. The defense attorney, a man named Robert Shunn, tried a different approach. He painted Donna as a confused grandmother, a retired healthcare worker who'd misunderstood modern protocols, who'd been trying to help a difficult child using methods that have been acceptable during her career. My client is not a monster, Chin said earnestly. She's a grandmother who loved her granddaughter, who stepped in to help after her daughter's tragic death, who used her medical knowledge to address behavioral concerns. Did she make errors? Yes. Did she misunderstand the authorization requirements for the research program? Yes, but criminal intent, deliberate harm, those are very different things. Kevin listened without expression. The trial unfolded over the course of 3 weeks. Dr. Harding testified first, explaining in clinical detail the dangers of giving lorazepam to a 5-year-old child. He described Yaya's symptoms when she'd been brought to urgent care, the potential risks she'd faced, the developmental concerns that could have resulted from continued exposure. In my professional opinion, Dr. Harding said clearly, the administration of this medication to a child of Leah's age constituted a serious threat to her health and well-being. The dosage, the frequency, the lack of medical supervision, all of it was profoundly inappropriate. Patricia Klein testified next nervously but honestly. She brought the logs, the payment records, the documentation of data submissions. She explained MedTech's research program, the consent requirements, the assumption that Donna had proper authorization. She seemed so professional, Patricia said, so knowledgeable. She'd bring in these detailed reports perfectly formatted, clearly written. We had no reason to doubt her. Did you ever verify that she had parental authorization? Amanda asked. Patricia's voice dropped. No, we accepted the forms she submitted. We didn't check the signatures. The forged authorization documents were entered into evidence. A handwriting expert testified that the signature didn't match Kevin's verified signature, that the writing pressure and letter formation were distinctly different. Paul Halberg testified about his experiences with Donnie years earlier, about his suspicions regarding Claire's childhood illnesses, about the pattern of behavior he'd observed. The defense objected repeatedly, arguing that events from decades ago weren't relevant to current charges, but Judge Thompson allowed the testimony as background information. I try to warn people, Paul said, his voice thick with regret. But I couldn't prove anything then. Maybe now with this evidence, people will finally understand what she is. Then it was Kevin's turn. He walked to the witness stand with steady steps, placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down and faced the courtroom. The jury, the judge, Donna, sitting at the defense table with her hands folded and her expression carefully neutral. Amanda asked him to describe his relationship with Donna, the access she'd had to Leah, the discovery of the medication. Kevin spoke calmly, factually, without embellishment or dramatics. He described finding the pill bottle, Yaya's explanation of the medication's effects, the drive to urgent care. He described his confrontation with Donna, her defensive responses, her complete lack of remorse. When I told her she could have harmed my daughter, Kevin said, his voice level. She told me I was being dramatic. She said she knew what she was doing. She said I should be grateful. Did Ms. Hallberg ever apologize? Amanda asked. No, not once. Did she ever express concern for Leah's well-being? No, only concern about being accused of wrongdoing. Chun cross-examined him carefully, trying to suggest that Kevin was overreacting, that his grief over his wife's death had made him paranoid, that he'd misinterpreted Donna's intentions. Isn't it true, Mr. Ward, that Miss Hallberg provided significant help after your wife died? That she was supportive, involved, caring. She was involved. Kevin agreed. But it turns out she was using that involvement to access my daughter for research purposes. That's not what I asked. That's my answer. Shin shifted tactics. You were angry with Miss Hallberg, weren't you? Angry that she questioned your parenting. Angry that she offered advice. I was frustrated sometimes, yes, but I wasn't angry enough to fabricate criminal charges against her. But you did cut off all contact immediately without giving her a chance to explain. Kevin met Chin's eyes steadily. Why? I discovered she'd been drugging my 5-year-old daughter. Yes, I cut off contact. That's what any reasonable parent would do. The cross-examination continued for over an hour, but Kevin remained calm, consistent, unshakable. He didn't lose his temper. He didn't overstate or dramatize. He simply told the truth. When he finally stepped down from the witness stand, Amanda gave him a small, approving nod. Donna testified in her own defense. She sat in the witness box wearing a conservative navy dress, her hair neatly styled, her expression carefully arranged into wounded dignity. Chun led her through her version of events. She'd been a devoted grandmother. She'd stepped in to help after Claire's death. She'd been concerned about Leah's behavioral issues. She consulted her medical knowledge and provided what she believed was appropriate intervention. I never intended to harm her, Donna said. Her voice trembling slightly. I love Leah. Everything I did was out of concern for her well-being. Can you explain the research program participation? Chen asked. I've been volunteering with MedTech for years. Donna said they were looking for long-term observational data on childhood behavioral patterns. I thought I was helping advance medical science while also managing Leah's difficulties. I believed I had authorization. Did you forge Mr. Reward's signature on the consent forms? Donna hesitated. I thought I had verbal permission. When he asked me to help with Leah, I interpreted that as broad authorization. I may have made an error in how I documented that, but it wasn't deliberate fraud. Shin nodded sympathetically. But you're saying this was a miscommunication, a misunderstanding of requirements. Yes, Donna said. Exactly. Amanda's cross-examination was surgical. Miss Hallberg, you testified that you had verbal permission from Mr. Ward. When exactly did he give you this permission? Donna faltered. Well, it was implied. He asked me to help care for Leah. That's not what I asked. When did he specifically give you permission to administer prescription medication to his daughter? He didn't say it in those exact words. But, so he never explicitly gave you permission? No. But, M. Hallberg, you worked in healthcare for 30 years. You're familiar with the concept of informed consent, correct? Yes. And you understand that implied permission is not the same as explicit documented consent for medical procedures. I suppose, but in family situations. Answer yes or no, please. Do you understand that implied permission is not sufficient for administering prescription medication to a minor? Donna's jaw tightened. Yes. Amanda held up one of the log entries. This is from the documentation you submitted to MedTech. It reads, Subject L exhibited increased drowsiness within 45 minutes of 1 mg dose. Reduced activity level observed. Does that sound like the language of a concerned grandmother? I was being professional. But does it sound like someone conducting clinical observations? I was documenting so I could help her better. You wrote about your granddaughter like she was a lab rat. Amanda's voice remained calm, but the words landed with devastating precision. You track her responses. You calculated dosages. You documented sleep patterns and behavioral changes. And you accepted $500 a month for doing it. I needed the money. Donna's composure finally cracked. Do you know how expensive everything is? My pension doesn't cover. She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd admitted. The courtroom was absolutely silent. So, it was about money, Amanda said quietly. You drugged a 5-year-old child because you needed the money. Donna's face flushed red. That's not. I was helping both. Helping Leia and helping research. It wasn't just about, but the money was a factor. I didn't hurt her. Dr. Harding testified that she could have developed serious respiratory problems. That continued exposure could have caused developmental delays. Were you listening to that testimony, Miss Hallberg? I was careful. You gave her medication not prescribed to her. You gave her adult dosages. You gave her multiple doses in single days when she didn't comply with your wishes. That's what the logs show. Amanda set down the document. How is any of that being careful? Donna had no answer. The closing argument stretched through an entire afternoon. Chen did his best, painting Donna as a flawed but well-intentioned grandmother who'd made poor decisions. He emphasized her age, her grief over losing her daughter, her decades of service in healthcare. He asked the jury to consider that mistakes shouldn't be criminalized, that the absence of actual harm should be weighed against the charges. Amanda's closing was precise and powerful. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not about whether Donna Hallberg loved her granddaughter. It's not about whether she was sad about her daughter's death. It's not even about whether she believed she was doing the right thing. She paused, making eye contact with each juror. This case is about what she actually did. She took a prescription medication meant for adult anxiety and gave it to a 5-year-old child. She documented the effects. She accepted payment. She forged authorization documents. These are facts supported by indisputable evidence. Amanda gestured to the exhibits spread across the prosecution table. The defense wants you to believe this was a misunderstanding. But look at the logs. Look at the careful documentation. Look at the calculations in her personal notebook. This wasn't confusion. This was deliberate, systematic behavior. This was a woman who looked at her vulnerable granddaughter and saw a business opportunity. She let that sink in. The defense asked you to consider that no permanent harm occurred. But that's only because Kevin Ward discovered what was happening and stopped it immediately. If he hadn't found that pill bottle, if Leia hadn't told him about feeling sleepy, how long would this have continued? How much harm might have resulted? We can't know, but we do know that Dr. Harding testified that serious damage was likely if the behavior had continued. Amanda's voice softened slightly. This little girl trusted her grandmother. After losing her mother, she needed love, stability, safety. Instead, she got medication that made her foggy and tired. She got turned into a research subject without her knowledge or consent. She got betrayed by someone who should have protected her. She walked back to her table, then turned one final time. When you deliberate, I ask you to remember something simple. If a stranger had done this to a child, would we hesitate to call it criminal? Would we search for excuses? Would we suggest it was a misunderstanding? Or would we call exactly what it is, child endangerment, fraud, forgery, and a violation of everything we believe about protecting the vulnerable? She sat down. Kevin watched the jury's faces and saw several of them nodding slightly. The jury deliberated for 2.5 days. Kevin spent that time trying to maintain normally for Leia, taking her to school, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, but his mind was always partially in that courtroom, wondering what the jury was discussing, what they were thinking, whether justice would prevail. On the third day, Detective Rivera called. They have a verdict. Kevin arranged for a neighbor to watch Leia and drove to the courthouse. The courtroom filled quickly. News of the case had spread through Pineford, and people wanted to see the conclusion. Kevin sat in the same spot he'd occupied throughout the trial. Amanda gave him a brief, encouraging smile. Across the aisle, Donna sat with her shoulders rigid, her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles were white. Judge Thompson entered. Everyone stood, then sat again. The jury filed in, their faces carefully neutral. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Thompson asked. The foreman, a middle-aged woman who'd worked as a high school teacher for 20 years, stood. We have, Your Honor, on the charge of child endangerment. How do you find guilty? Kevin felt something release in his chest. On the charge of administering medication without authorization. Guilty on the charge of fraud. Guilty on the charge of forgery. Guilty on the charge of conducting unauthorized human subjects research. Guilty. Donna made a small sound. Something between a gasp and a sob. Chen placed a hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off. Judge Thompson thanked the jury and set sentencing for 2 weeks later. The sentencing hearing was brief. Judge Thompson listened to the defense's plea for leniency. Donna's age, her lack of prior criminal record, her history of service in healthcare. Chen argued that probation and community service would be appropriate, that incarceration would serve no purpose. Amanda argued for the maximum sentence, emphasizing the severity of the crimes, the vulnerability of the victim, the calculated nature of the behavior. Judge Thompson considered for only a few minutes before delivering his decision. Miss Hallberg, I've reviewed the evidence in this case extensively. I've considered your background, your circumstances, your stated intentions, but I keep coming back to one fundamental fact. You treated a child as a source of income. You knowingly gave her medication not prescribed to her. You documented the effects. You accepted payment. And when confronted, you showed no remorse, only defensiveness and denial. Donna sat motionless, staring straight ahead. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. Judge Thompson continued. This was sustained, deliberate behavior over a period of months. You violated the trust of your own grandchild. You endangered her health and development, and you did it for money. He set his jaw. I'm sentencing you to 5 years in the state correctional facility, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You'll be required to complete counseling and will be prohibited from any contact with minors unsupervised. You'll also pay restitution to cover medical and legal expenses incurred by Mr. Ward. Donna's face crumbled, but not with guilt, with anger, with outrage of being held accountable. This isn't fair, she said, her voice rising. I didn't hurt her. I was trying to help. You're all overreacting, Miss Hallberg, Judge Thompson said sharply. I suggest you remain silent. Officers, please take her into custody. 2 bailiffs approached. Donna continued protesting as they led her away, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, that everyone was being unreasonable, that she'd been persecuted. Kevin watched her go with no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, only relief, only certainty that he'd done what needed to be done. Over the following months, Leah continued to thrive. She started first grade in the fall, made new friends, joined a soccer team. Her teacher reported that she was bright, engaged, creative. Her drawings were full of color again. Her laughter came easily. Kevin established new routines, new traditions. They started volunteering at the local animal shelter on Saturday mornings, walking dogs, and playing with cats. Leah loved it. Loved the feeling of helping creatures who needed care. Daddy, she said one Saturday as they walked a friendly golden retriever around the shelter's yard. I'm glad we don't see Grandma anymore. Kevin looked down at her, surprised. Yeah, why is that? Because she always made me feel fuzzy and tired, and she looked at me in a way that made me feel small, like I wasn't really a person. Ela was quiet for a moment, throwing a tennis ball for the dog. Now I feel big again, like myself. Kevin crouched down and pulled her into a hug. You're yourself. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. She hugged him back tightly. One evening after Leah was asleep, Kevin sat on the small balcony of their apartment overlooking Pineford Lake. The water was dark and still, reflecting the scattered lights of homes on the opposite shore. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and approaching autumn. He thought about Claire, about how much she would have loved seeing Leah at this age. Curious, energetic, confident. He thought about the trust Claire had placed in her mother, never knowing what Donna was truly capable of. He thought about all the what-ifs, all the ways things might have gone differently. But mostly, he thought about the choices he'd made. He'd acted with precision and determination. He'd gathered evidence, built an undeniable case, pursued justice without compromise or mercy. He'd protected his daughter from someone who'd viewed her as a commodity, who'd been willing to risk her health and development for money. Kevin wasn't a violent man. He didn't revel in vengeance, but he was absolutely unshakably certain that he'd done the right thing. I protected her, he said quietly to the night air. To Claire's memory, I did what you'd want, what any parent would want. The lake was silent, offering no answer, but Kevin didn't need one. He stood, took one last look at the peaceful water, and went inside, checked on Leah one more time. She was curled around her stuffed owl, breathing deeply, safely asleep. Then he went to his own room, feeling a quiet strength settle into his bones. His family had been fractured by someone else's greed and cruelty. But he'd rebuilt it through truth, courage, and an unwavering commitment to protection. And that Kevin knew was enough. That would always be enough. Story 2. After my wife's betrayal, I fled back to my granny's old house from my childhood. A few days later, an unexpected visitor fought through the blizzard to find me and said, "Get your coat. You're coming with me." I heard the man's voice before I even shut the door. Then her laugh. Too high, too sharp. It didn't sound like how she used to laugh when it was just us and cheap wine and movie nights. The coats weren't mine. 2 of them slung sloppy over the armchair, boots under the radiator. Our Bluetooth speaker was running her party playlist, the one she always blasted when she wanted to feel 20 again. I didn't need more than that. I stood in the kitchen looking at the 2 wine glasses on the counter, lipstick on one. His voice again, muffled, coming from the bedroom. She didn't even close the door. She walked out in a black tank top, barefoot, not even startled. She leaned against the doorframe like I was just another errand she forgot to handle. "You've been distant for months, Caleb," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Married to deadlines." I didn't say a word, just stared at her for half a second longer than I should have, then grabbed my keys and my laptop bag off the chair. "Seriously, that's your move?" she called after me. I didn't turn around. Didn't slam the door either. I walked out into the wind. Snow was already coming down hard, hitting sideways against the cars lining Maple Street. I walked 3 blocks without thinking, past the diner, past the shuttered florist, until I stopped under a busted street light and just stood there breathing. That's all I could do without screaming. I felt like a complete fool. My own place was still rented out. I'd signed the lease through mid-February to float my half of the mortgage on our shared condo. Tiffany said we needed options if things went south. Guess she was already planning her exit. I turned around and went to the only place I could, the office. Northlight Press was dead quiet that time of night. I swiped in and took the back hall to my edit bay, pulled the blackout curtains, dimmed the desk lamp, and opened my laptop like the world hadn't just kicked me in the ribs. I couldn't even get into my own apartment. I just sat there trying not to picture what she was doing in that bed. Hank Wells, our night security guy, knocked twice and handed me a mug of peppermint tea without saying a word. He's one of those old union men who know when to talk and when to shut up. I nodded. He nodded back. That's all we needed. By morning, she was there. Tiffany in my office, standing like she owned it, like she hadn't ripped the floor out from under me 12 hours earlier. "You didn't come home," she said, arms crossed like I was a teenager who missed curfew. Very unprofessional. I kept quiet and stared past her at the blank wall. Her tone shifted. "Quiet now, just for me. Without me, you're nobody here, Caleb." Right on cue, Joseph walked in. That fake slick smile of his, like everything's a photo op. He always hovered around Tiffany, always called himself a consultant, like that meant anything. "We're restructuring," he said, sliding into my space. "Consolidation of verticals, brand refresh, nothing personal." Tiffany stepped closer and said it plain. "Consider this your separation from duties. HR would be in touch." I kept my back straight. "I'll take my personal files and my final check." She smirked. "Hank's under instruction not to let you back in." By noon, my badge stopped working. I stood at the glass doors holding my laptop bag like it was a lifeline. Hank buzzed me out, his eyes low. He texted one word after. "Sorry." As I stepped into the wet snow, someone brushed past me in the lobby. Black wool coat, heels clicking like she knew exactly where she was going. Tina Brooks, the owner's daughter. She didn't recognize me, but I knew her face from every investor deck I'd ever been forced to read. She stopped just long enough for us to shake hands. Her grip was warm. Then that thing hit me. The static, the tight pull in my ribs, the warning. I saw it clear as a headline behind my eyes. A black SUV nose down in a drift. Steam rolling off the hood, smoke curling in the cabin. Mile marker 42. I let go of her hand. "Don't take your Range Rover north tomorrow," I told her. She tilted her head. "I've got a 10 o'clock in Albany." "Then don't take that car," I said. "Not north. Not tomorrow." She blinked once, real slow, then walked away. I told myself it was just nerves, just editorial gut. But the picture stuck in my chest like a lit match and it wouldn't go out. The lock didn't click. I tried twice hard and it was useless. Tiffany had changed it. I stood there on the stoop with snow hitting sideways. One hand on the knob, the other stuffed in my coat. And I just laughed once, short and mean. She'd done it fast. Same day fast. That was her. When she cut you loose, she didn't leave a fray. Nothing left but bone. I waited 15 minutes like a stray. My nose burned and my jeans were damp to the knee. Nothing. No lights came on. No apology. No second thoughts. I gave up. Got back in my Subaru and aimed north. Grandma's place sat 86 miles out past the state road and the river cut. Out where the highway ends and the land flattens like paper. She raised me out there. No parents, no safety net, just her. A small garden and a fireplace that ran hot until it didn't. She used to say, "This house will hold you when people won't." I kept both hands on the wheel and my eyes on the lines. The heater coughed, the engine wah-had on hills, but it kept moving. Wind battered the glass like fists. That whole drive, not once did I think about where my career went. I only thought about how quiet the house was going to be and whether the roof patch had held. An hour out, The county road started disappearing under drifts. I made it as far as the plow berm and had to park it. Beyond that, the tires spun, and I wasn't about to die, proving a point. I got out, wrapped my scarf high, and started walking. Each gust sliced like a blade. The snow stung through my gloves. I counted fence posts and focused on the ground. About halfway, I heard something I wasn't expecting. A weak voice, then a hollow thud. I looked down the ditch and saw Barbara Miller face down in the snow, bags scattered, one boot missing. Her coat was half open, groceries in the ditch, canned beans, paper towels, a bent loaf of bread. Her glasses were askew, lenses frosted. She'd known me since I was 12. Gave me peanut brittle on Christmas. I yelled her name, got nothing but a groan. I couldn't carry her, not without dropping her. My fingers were already numb. I scanned the road, then saw an old sled leaned against a fence like someone meant to fix it one day and forgot. It was half cracked and missing a rope. I dragged it over, tied her coat belt to the crossbar, and loaded her on with one bag tucked under each arm. Then I hauled. Step, brace, pull. Step, brace, pull. My hands screamed. Took 15 minutes to reach her place. Eddie opened the door in socks and a flannel shirt, his eyes wild. He helped me get her inside, offloaded the bags, and wrapped her in 2 quilts while muttering, "Stubborn woman." She came to enough to call me her little proofreader, which made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. I told Eddie I'd come back tomorrow with salt for the path. Then I kept going. By the time I hit Grandma's place, I was shaking so bad I couldn't get the key to slide. The lock stuck like always, but the old butter knife trick worked. That first breath inside smelled like cedar dust and stale coffee. The silence nearly broke me. The kitchen window had cracked again. I taped it fast with what was left in the drawer. The logs I'd split back in fall were low, maybe 8 left. I jammed 3 in the stove and lit them with pages from an old phone book. I didn't bother unpacking. I just sat on the floor, hands pressed against the iron, trying to feel something through the gloves. I must have slept about an hour. When I woke up, my hands didn't feel like mine. The skin was pale and waxy, and the knuckles looked wrong, tight, swollen, like balloon joints. I couldn't flex my fingers without pain. I stood dizzy, and that's when the knot came. Not the wind, not a tree limb, a real knock. I opened the door and blinked hard. It was her. Tina Brooks, black wool coat, cheeks pink, hair in a braid, snowflakes clinging to her sleeves. "Are you Caleb Nelson?" she asked like she already knew. I nodded once, then leaned against the doorframe to stay upright. "How on earth did you find me out here?" She exhaled through her nose, shifting her weight. "I called Hank, told him I'd seen you yesterday. He said if it's a storm, you'd come here, gave me the road name, said you were too stubborn to call anybody. Of course he did." Hank's loyalty didn't talk. It acted. She stepped closer, brushing a curl off her forehead. "On the northbound, just past mile 42, my driver had to swerve around a van half buried in the drift. Same spot you warned me about." I let that sink in. My ribs felt tight again. "I turned around," she added. "Moved Albany to later, switched into a sedan, and told my assistant I was checking on something that couldn't wait." Her voice was steady. Not warm, not cold, just sure. By mid-afternoon, I heard it for myself. The scanner app on my phone crackled through the static. Black Range Rover pulled from a snowbank at mile marker 42. Not hers. Same drift, same hour. She caught me watching my hands under the table lamp. They looked worse in the light. Red lines across the joints, stiff and purple near the thumbs. "Get your coat," she said, no hesitation. "I'm not leaving you to lose your fingers." I wanted to argue. Tell her I'd handled worse, that I didn't need help from the boss's daughter, but I didn't say a word. I grabbed my coat and let her guide me outside, down the porch steps, into the car with the heater already running. At the county hospital, she walked straight to the nurse's station and put her card on the counter like it was a shield. "This one needs triage," she said, nodding at me. "He's mine." And just like that, I wasn't drifting anymore. The intravenous drip clicked steady at my side. My hands were wrapped to the wrist, thick and white, like I'd stuck them in cake frosting. I could feel them pulsing, not with pain. Just that weird, numb pressure that told me I was one bad night away from worse. The nurse walked in, grinning like we shared a joke. "Your wife's a force," she said, checking my chart. "I'm not married," I mumbled. She snorted. "Then she's your boss." She left still laughing. Tina was in a plastic chair near the window with a legal pad and pen. No makeup, hair in a knot that had clearly been redone more than once. She looked like she hadn't blinked since I'd passed out. She glanced up. Your last name? She asked, tone even. Nelson? I nodded once, slow. She nodded back. Hank confirmed. Said you were stubborn but straight. That tracked. She sat forward, elbows on her knees. Does that thing in your chest, whatever it is, ever get it wrong? I shifted on the pillow. It's not magic. It's just gut instinct. Editor's instinct, maybe. You warned me about the road. That wasn't gut. I don't call it visions, I said flat. I don't need to believe in something to use it. Call it what you want, she said. I'm listening. She flipped a page on the pad, scanned a note, and let out a breath. I think Tiffany and Joseph are bleeding Northlight. My mother's been hearing chatter through the foundation. Expenses don't match projects. Things feel off. I didn't move. Just watched her jaw tighten. I want to build something honest, she said. I'm done playing inside the machine. I need someone who smells rot before it spreads. I said nothing. I'll cover your treatment. Give you a desk. Temporary setup for now, war room style. We'll run lean, separate slate, different books. I blinked. I don't want to rescue. I'm not rescuing you, she said, voice like steel. I'm hiring you. The room went quiet. Only the IV drip filled the silence. My dad wants me to stay on script, she added after a beat. Keep the deals he signed. Marry the guy he picked looked polished for the shareholders. How's that working out? She smiled without warmth. He still thinks Gordon's an asset. I cocked my head. Why me? She didn't even blink. You warned me when you didn't have to. And Hank says you've been carrying an imprint lead's weight for 2 years without a title bump. That's not a guy looking to coast. That's a guy who wants things right. Right then, the doctor came in. Young, fast-talking, clipboard in hand. Frostnip and some infection risk, he said, flipping pages. You got lucky. We caught it early. 2 weeks in wraps, some PT after. You'll be near normal by week 6 if you don't do anything dumb. No hero moves. I looked at my hands. Guess I'll learn to type with oven mitts. He chuckled, scribbled something, and walked out. Tina stood and grabbed a paper cup off the windowsill. I brought you coffee. I sipped it. It was awful. She opened her bag and pulled out a beat-up paperback. This manuscript yours? She asked, flipping to the margin notes. Final edits before I got canned? I said. Author's green but has teeth. She pointed at a sentence I'd circled. Why this one? It's overwritten. Trying too hard. She nodded. You see straight. I didn't answer. But for the first time in days, my breath came without drag. It wasn't the meds. It was her sitting there asking real questions, reading the pages like they mattered, like I still mattered. 4 days in, she came back with a canvas satchel and dropped it on the tray table beside my water cup. What's this? I asked, not touching it. Board packets, vendor files, some consulting invoices, all too neat, too round, and too vague. You want me to sniff? She met my eyes. Tell me if I'm wrong. I tilted my head. You're not. She pulled the chair closer. I've been hunting dead air since last spring. People using old contracts to hide new moves. Joseph keeps recommending vendors he trusts, but every time he says that, I hear a number behind it. You said your mom heard rumors about what? Middleman deals, kickbacks, soft billed hours, basically old school skimming dressed up like optimization. And you think Tiffany's in it with him? I think she runs it and Joseph's her inside arm. That lined up with what I'd suspected for months, but never had proof of. Every time I'd flagged a contract, Tiffany buried it in meetings or rewrote the scope to look clean. Tina pushed the satchel closer. I need a second set of eyes. Someone who's been inside but isn't scared of the names. I asked the question I hadn't wanted to out loud. What about Gordon? She leaned back like the question left a bad taste. He thinks I'm setting up a passion project. Said I should focus on foundation optics and leave ops to real players. That is language. Every word. I shifted, wincing. You don't want a project. You want a reckoning. She didn't deny it. I'm in, I said. But only if I see the whole map. No half routes. You'll get it. Everything I have. I reached out with both bandaged hands and nudged the satchel closer. My knuckles throbbed, but I needed to touch it. Needed to feel like I still had skin in the game. This one, I said, flipping through the stack and pulling a line item invoice marked consulting third quarter rollover. Smells like bleach. She grinned, eyes tired but sharp. I knew it. She gave me the guest room on the second floor. Window facing a half-bare maple. Room was plain. Fresh paint, clean sheets, no art, just a folding chair and a sturdy desk. Like she knew I'd use both. "This is not charity," she said, standing in the doorway. "Clock starts at 9 sharp. I'm up before that anyway," I told her. "I know," she said, and shut the door. The next morning, I heard him before I saw him. His laugh echoed off the walls. Gordon Barnes, perfect posture, perfect teeth, loafers even inside. His kind of confidence wasn't built, it was performed. When Tina introduced us, he didn't shake my hand. Just looked me up and down like I was a contractor who tracked dirt. "So, this is the editor," he said. "The one with the psychic weather reports." Tina didn't flinch. I didn't either. He leaned in a little. "What do you do now? Goes to write horoscopes? Read tea leaves between chapters?" I looked at him once, then went back to my coffee. At dinner, he tried again. Question after question how long I'd been out of work. Whether I liked living off charity, if Tina was starting a side imprint or a rescue shelter. Tina set her fork down and spoke without looking at him. "He's my pilot. He's here because I asked." Gordon smiled wide, showed all his teeth, and shut up. After that, things settled into a rhythm. Mornings. I reviewed vendor packets with a spatula stuck under my arm because my hands still hated gripping anything tighter than a coffee cup. I made an omelet on the third try, burned the first, over-salted the second. Tina ate the burnt one and said it tasted like pride. I almost believed her. The townhouse wasn't rich. Not like you'd expect from someone in her position. No marble, no glass walls or expensive sculptures. Just dry erase charts taped to the fridge. Timelines and names on index cards stuck to a corkboard in the hall. One shared printer. No assistants. She ran meetings at the kitchen table. 40 minutes max. No tangents, no buzzwords. It felt like breathing real air after years of choking on slogans. One afternoon, Joseph just showed up. Claimed he was dropping by to say hi, but the way he scanned the kitchen said otherwise. Tina kept it polite. I kept my eyes on the folder I was tagging. Then he pulled a slick white card from his jacket and slid it toward her. "New auto service partner," he said. "Same group we're trying to use across fleet. You should get ahead of it. Standardize." I picked up the card, scanned it fast. Same logo from the vendor list I'd flagged 2 days earlier. One of the shell companies. He'd used an old return label address from before we locked the files. That told me everything. He looked at me like I wasn't supposed to be in the room. I slid the card back across the table. "She's not interested." Joseph chuckled. "Didn't realize you spoke for her now. She's got ears. She can tell you herself." Tina stood up then. "Thanks, Joseph. I've got it from here." He left without pushing. That night, I stopped by Eddie's place after therapy. Left a box of rock salt on his porch with a sticky note. "For the ditch path. Sorry again for the sled." No signature, just that. Back at the townhouse, the air smelled like rosemary and something roasting. Tina's mother, Evelyn, was on speakerphone. Her voice was low, slow, bookstore soft, the kind that settles your shoulders without trying. She asked Tina what I'd eaten. Said it like a habit, like she already counted me in. I didn't know what to say to that, so I kept peeling carrots while Tina lied and said I'd made stew. At night, I started sleeping again. Not deep, but real. No more dreams of fog and wire. I dreamed in lines again, scenes that made sense. I told myself the heat I felt in my chest around Tina was relief. Just relief. Gordon started coming home later, always with some donor story, some crisis that needed him urgently. One night he looked pale and talked about a minor health scare his doctor was monitoring. He said the words fast like he'd practiced them. "Something in my enzymes," he told us over Rosado. "They're watching for early markers. Could be nothing. Could be not nothing." Tina looked concerned but didn't rush to ask questions. The next day he mentioned a therapy. "Crazy expensive." He said like 14,800 a round. "They're looking at 10 rounds. A week later, it was a different number. "Closer to 12 grand, he said this time. "Insurance might only cover part, but I'll figure it out." By the third version of the story, he'd landed on 9,600 a week, maybe for 12 weeks, no test names, no facility, just vague clinical terms and shifting math. Tina asked calmly. "Do you have paperwork?" He nodded. Yeah, I'll send it over. It's in my inbox somewhere." He didn't. The morning after Gordon dodged Tina's request for paperwork, we sat across from each other in a yellow-lit cafe on 3rd. The place smelled like burnt espresso and warm bread, the kind of place where every table wobbled a little. Tina spread papers across the laminate surface like she was mapping a battle. "This is the beacon slate," she said, tapping her pen against a hand-drawn chart. "Separate from the old books. Clean lines, long-form projects, transparent ad rates, no kickbacks, no middleman add-ons. Every vendor line gets a real scope and a real contract with a real phone number behind it. I looked over the layout. It was ambitious, but it wasn't fantasy. You'll get pushback, I said. People like fog. Fog hides hands. I don't care if they like fog, she said. I care if they can stand in daylight. It felt good to hear it. Really good. I recruited 3 writers I trusted. Nora, Felix, and Darius, plus she, the sharpest copy chief I'd worked with in my old imprint. I told them this was payroll straight. No games, no soft money, no waiting for signatures that never came. They all showed up ready, notebooks out, coats dripping on the carpet of the townhouse. They looked hungry in the best way, hungry for work that didn't involve watching their backs. We spent the rest of that week building the skeleton of the first slate, long-form pieces, narrative essays, a feature series about rural hospitals, a data-driven business report on small-town development. Hina didn't hover. She sat at the far end of the table and asked clean, simple questions. What's the story? What's the angle? What's the timeline? She listened more than she talked, which is rare for anyone raised in a tower of glass. Around midweek, Evelyn dropped by the townhouse with a paper box of scones. She knocked once, then let herself in, calling out, "I brought fuel." Before we even looked up. She set the box on the table and looked straight at me. Her eyes were warm and curious, like she was cataloging a new book for a shelf she already loved. "You have quiet eyes," she said. "That helps you see." I didn't know what to do with that, so I just nodded. Evelyn had that bookstore calm about her. Soft sweaters, gentle voice, but sharp enough underneath that she saw everything without making you feel naked. While the writers brainstormed at the other end of the table, she told me stories about her old book club in a strip mall 20 years back. They'd meet once a week with folding chairs, drink cheap coffee, and keep running tabs for folks who were between paychecks. People paid when they could, she said. If they couldn't, they brought homemade bread or shoveled snow. It balanced out. She said it like the world had once been that simple. Back before deals got slippery and families turned into headlines, I listened harder than I meant to. I kept picturing that life. Straight lines, warm bread, neighbors who didn't cut you loose over optics. At lunch, Tina's phone buzzed with her father's name. She set it on speaker because she hates whispering. "Christina," he said, voice deep, sharp, too smooth. "I'm hearing chatter about you building an off-book slate." "It's not off books." She said, "It's transparent." "That's the point. You are a Brooks." He said, "There are familial expectations. Stakeholder harmony to consider. Optics with Gordon in the frame. You know how this works." She leaned back in her chair, jaw set. "Dad, I resigned from your board in 60 days. Put it in writing. You don't own my decisions." A full beat of silence. Then he hung up. No goodbye, no warning, just gone. Hina stared at the phone a moment, then slid it across the table to me. "You ever watch a tether snap and feel relieved?" "All the time," I said. "My grandma used to look off at nothing and say things before they happened. I write it off as gut now, but she called it a gift." Hina tilted her head. "Call it whatever helps you sleep." The rest of the afternoon, we combed through vendor lists line by line. I flagged suspicious items. Hina cross-checked board approvals. At one point, she asked if I'd mind reaching out to someone in finance who wouldn't sell us out or tip anything to Joseph. I knew exactly who to call. Leia Chen, VP of Finance, one of the only people in that building who treated numbers like truth instead of a suggestion. She came to the townhouse after work wearing a gray coat and carrying a folder thick with printouts. She didn't waste time on small talk. "Show me the names," she said. I slid them across the table. She circled the same lines I had almost instantly. Round numbers, vague scopes, recycled language, identical signatures. "These vendors are fake," she said. "Or at least repurposed. Somebody's running money through them." "Somebody meaning who?" Hina asked. Leia gave a tight smile. "You want me to say it out loud?" "Please," Tina said. "It smells like Joseph's work," she replied. "And whoever's giving him cover." She didn't have to say Tiffany's name. It sat in the middle of the table like a stain. While Tina and Leia discussed next steps, my phone buzzed. Gordon had sent her a picture, a clinic lobby, beige tiles, a wristband on his hand, some generic pamphlet about recovery on the chair next to him. She held the phone up toward me like she wanted a second opinion. I studied the background. The glass pattern on the divider was familiar. "That's the spa clinic on 46th, I said, keeping my voice low. "They sell sleep pods and vitamin drips, not medical treatment." She stiffened. "Just a small shift, but I saw it, felt it in the air. "I appreciate you looking," she said quietly. I didn't say more. Not my place. My job was to keep the slate clean, not untangle her relationship with a man who couldn't keep his story straight. Later, after the writers left, and the townhouse dimmed to that warm evening glow, Evelyn pulled me aside in the kitchen while Tina took a call. She poured me tea like she'd done it 100 times. "Don't let the big building chew your pieces," she said, stirring her own cup. It tried to chew mine and Tina's. "Keep who you are." "I'm trying," I said. "Some days it feels like holding sand." She smiled. "Sand can build foundations if you pack it with purpose." I didn't know how to respond. I just nodded and sipped the tea. It tasted like chamomile and something steadier. When Tina came back into the room, phone still lit in her hand. She looked between us like she knew exactly what had been said, but wouldn't ask. She just sat down, opened her laptop, and motioned toward the pile of notes on the table. "Back to it," she said. And we did. We worked until the street lights flickered on outside the window, filling that little townhouse with the kind of focus you can't fake. Clean, sharp, forward. By week 6, I could close both hands again. Still stiff in the mornings, but I was back to typing with real keys and gripping coffee mugs without dropping them. The gauze was off. The work was sharp. The beacon slate had shape now. Real writers on real deadlines, real vendors we could actually verify. That morning, Tina handed me a folder and told me to meet a documentary director 2 towns over. "Take the pool forward," she said. "It's full on gas." I nodded, zipped my coat, but something in my chest pulled tight. That static again, ribs humming like a low-grade current. My gut, the same one that had screamed under the street lamp outside our old place. The same one that pulled me off that road at mile marker 42, kicked hard. At 8:10 sharp, I looked over at Mason, our new assistant, who was halfway through organizing the courier log. "You still heading to the storage unit?" "Yeah," he said, flipping through labels. "Taking the cab since I don't drive stick." "You don't need to," I told him. "Take the Ford instead. Drop the delivery first." "I'll get a cab." He blinked. "You sure?" I nodded. "Just feels like a cab day." He grabbed the Ford keys, gave a thumbs up, and left. At 10:22, Mason called my cell. He was shaking so hard I could barely understand him. "Brakes." He said they failed. At the intersection on South and 9th, I missed a box truck by like 3 feet. Rolled right into a snowbank. I'm fine, but man, that car is toast. The tow guy sent pictures. Undercarriage shot, brake line sliced clean, no rust, no slow wear, just a knife cut, fresh and surgical. I told Tina, then drove straight to the garage. We parked the Ford under lock. Leia showed up before I even finished signing the incident form. She walked the bay with the garage manager while I watched from 10 feet back. "He won't meet my eyes," she said, walking over. "You see that? Every time he lies," I said. She held up a printout. "There was a purchase order last month for emergency brake service. Got waived." "By who?" She flipped it around. Joseph Keene's login dated 3 days before the invoice for fleet tune-ups we'd flagged last week. Detective Reed showed up 15 minutes later. Long coat, Cydia-sued notepad, no small talk. He checked the Ford, logged the photo evidence, and handed me a card. "If this gets bigger, I can liaise with County PD, but you're going to need to keep that car preserved. You do not move it. Chain of custody matters now." He tilted his head at Mason's name on the report. "Why would someone want your kid assistant dead?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "That car was supposed to be mine." He underlined it in his notebook and nodded once. Slow. Joseph came by later that afternoon with 2 coffees and that fake casual smile like nothing ever stuck to him. "Crazy about that, Ford," he said. "Good thing our service partner's responsive, huh?" He handed me one of the cups like we were buddies again. Then he dropped the name of the same shop he'd pitched Tina at dinner 2 weeks back. Said it like he was just being helpful. I didn't drink the coffee. I went upstairs, opened the archive folder, and printed every invoice we had tied to that vendor. The name traced to a shell set up 6 months ago. No real office. Website was a 1-page template with a stock photo of a bay door and a contact form that didn't return calls. The business address, a mailbox store on 3rd. Tina was in the back room when I handed her the file. She didn't flip through it, just looked at the cover page, then went still. "Owner on the state filings is Kara Mercer," I said. "Tiffany's cousin." Tina's jaw didn't move. She just exhaled slow. "Hose data on the website is privacy shielded," I added. but the IP traces to a laptop that logged in from Northlight's guest Wi-Fi 4 weeks ago during one of Joseph's strategy sessions. She didn't raise her voice, didn't panic, just said, "Put this in a folder. Don't send it anywhere yet." "Why?" I asked. "Because timing matters," she said. "And if we're going to set fire to the whole thing, we need it to burn through without smoke." That night, Gordon came home looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Hair messy, pale under his expensive coat. He dropped into the dining chair and said, "Doctor wants me on targeted antibodies. 9,600 a week. Might need 12 rounds." Tina looked up from her tablet. "Did you talk to your insurer?" He nodded like a bobblehead. "There's a hiccup. Coverage gap. Mix up with the paperwork. They're fixing it." Then he leaned forward. "I just need a bridge. 2 weeks. You float me the first 2 and I'll cover the rest." She didn't answer right away. Just tapped her pen once against her water glass. "Bridge loans don't exist between partners," she said. His eyes went wet. "Tina, come on. You know what I'm dealing with. I'm asking for documentation, not a fight. I don't have it yet." "Then you're not getting the money yet." He stood up like he was going to throw something, then stopped. Left the room without another word. I watched the whole thing without saying a word. I still wanted to protect her. Even after all this, even when I knew she didn't need it, even when the lines were this clear, which is a dumb thing to say about a woman like Tina, she didn't need a shield. But something in me wanted to keep her from having to do this alone. So instead of opening my mouth, I made soup, chopped carrots and garlic while Gordon sulked in the spare room, and Tina answered emails like nothing happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain kept running the numbers, the timelines, the angles of the cut line on the Ford. I saw Mason's face on the phone when he called, pale, shaking. Could have been his funeral. Could have been mine. I dreamed of steel, snow, and a gloved hand reaching for a frozen door handle. I woke up in a sweat. I got up, pulled a notebook from the shelf, and wrote down everything I could remember from the dream: the exact position of the van, the sound the brakes didn't make, the shape of the ditch behind the mailbox store. Grandma always said, "Write it down. It matters." I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I knew the gut didn't lie. Tina's phone rang at 6:31. I was already awake, pouring hot water into a cracked mug when I heard her say, "Mom," and then nothing for a long stretch. Just breathing. She came out of the hallway barefoot, phone pressed to her cheek, face white. "Evelyn collapsed," she said. "In the shop, gripped a shelf. Clerk called 911. EMTs took her in. She's at County General." I grabbed the car keys without asking. The Volvo was blocked in. We rented a 4-door from the corner spot, a heater barely working, and back windows that didn't roll down. Highway alerts said no commercial trucks past exit 4 due to wind. We drove anyway, 3 hours, cold seeping through the seams. I held the GPS while Tina gripped the wheel and asked me to read the texts as they came. One from a nurse. "Stable for now. Mild arrhythmia. She's asking for you." The roads blurred gray-blue trees stiff with frost. We didn't speak more than a handful of words the whole ride. At the hospital, the nurse took us back for a 10-minute visit. Evelyn looked small in the bed, smaller than I remembered. Her hair was messy, and her hands trembled when she squeezed Tina's. But she smiled when she saw us. That same soft smile she gave me over tea the week before. "It's nothing," she said. "Just stress and rhythm. Words that float and mean nothing until someone makes them mean something." She asked if I'd had breakfast. I said, "Not yet." After 10 minutes, they wheeled her off for tests. Tina and I let ourselves into Evelyn's apartment with the emergency key. 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, a wall clock that ticked too loud. On the corkboard above the table were taped Polaroids of book club nights, 6 women holding mugs, stacks of paperbacks, 1 candle in a jelly jar. She stood in the middle of the room staring at those pictures. "I hate this," she said. "I hate not being able to fix it." "You're here," I said. That's the fix she wanted. We found eggs in the fridge, made them in a dented pan with 1 wobbly handle. She cracked. I stirred. No talking about Gordon, no emails, just eggs and plates and 2 chipped glasses of tap water. After we ate, she washed the pan and I dried it. The silence was comfortable, like the quiet between old friends. Later, we curled up on the second-hand couch under a thin knit blanket that smelled like lavender and dust. She leaned into me, shoulder warm, face close. We stayed quiet. I'm not a poet, so I won't dress it up. She kissed me slow, careful, honest. I kissed her back. My fingers didn't shake for the first time in weeks. I pulled back just long enough to ask, "Are you sure?" She nodded once. Not soft, firm. We drew the shades. I'll leave it at that. Sometime 4, I woke up to the smell of rain through the cracked window. Tina slept curled toward me, steady, arms tucked tight. I made coffee in Evelyn's old drip pot. It tasted like cardboard and pennies, but I drank it anyway. Sitting in the kitchen staring at nothing. I could see a life here. Small pieces, quiet mornings, grocery lists on fridge magnets. It didn't scare me. Her phone lit up on the counter. A message from Gordon. He'd sent a selfie from a hospital hallway, one of those polished lobbies with brushed metal chairs and sterile lighting. He wore a bracelet and a brave face. The caption said, "Fainted at an event, bad charts, waiting on full panel." It was all performance. The knot in my chest returned. Not fear, something tighter, responsibility, history, lines. When she walked into the kitchen, wrapped in her coat, cheeks still flushed, I handed her the phone. She read it and took a long beat before speaking. I said, "I can't be the other guy in someone's story." "I know," she said. "No triangles, no back rooms, no second lives. You and me, we don't carry half-light. We don't survive it." Her eyes were tired, but she didn't fight me. She just nodded once. "Clean." I kissed her forehead, picked up my backpack, didn't make a speech. The drive back to the city was long and silent. I didn't turn on the radio, just counted mile markers and watched the clouds shift like bruises. By the time I reached my place, the sun had dipped behind the buildings and the wind was picking up again. The one bedroom was small but dry. My tenants had moved out finally. The heat clicked on without sputtering. I tossed my bag inside and opened the fridge. Half a carton of milk, a frozen pizza, and 3 leftover ginger ales from some old night I didn't remember. I went heads down, kept working, kept chasing paper trails and calling vendors and building the slate line by line. We had new contracts to vet and distribution deals to clean up. I kept the reports organized, the notes sharp. Tina didn't text. I didn't call. At night, I sat at the edge of my bed and listened to the fridge hum. Wrote notes in a yellow pad and drank bad coffee from the same chipped mug. The silence wasn't heavy, but it pressed in just enough to remind me where I wasn't. And when I missed her, which was most nights, it came in strange places, like the empty hook where she used to hang her coat during war room meetings, or the smell of rosemary when I passed the produce aisle. I missed her in the kitchen, in the emails I almost forwarded, in the jokes I didn't send because no one else would get them. I missed her like a bruise. Quiet but deep. But clean is clean. And sometimes clean has to be enough. Work kept my hands from shaking. I spent the next week building out the editorial calendar line by line. Reconfirmed deliverables with writers, double-checked vendor contracts, pulled old invoices into one shared tracker, and highlighted anything with round numbers or recycled language. I brought in a data stringer. Nora knew a guy who used to pull shell trails for a watchdog blog. He worked quiet and fast. Every time something smelled off, he followed it like a bloodhound. I didn't hear much from Tina, just task notes and timestamps. But the work flowed like it was oxygen. Then at 12:14 a.m., my phone lit up. Text from her. 3 words. Got something. Now I called her. She picked up on the second ring, breath short like she'd just run upstairs. "I was combing through Joseph's trash folder," she said. "Auto recovery caught a draft before he wiped it. It's a payout routing doc. Consulting fees flagged to a family LLC. Whose family? Kara Mercer. Tiffany's cousin." She sent the file over. Subject line. Fourth quarter engagement structure. Attachments. Spreadsheet. Line item scope vague milestones. LLC address was a mailbox suite in Syracuse. Bank routing matched the deposit we'd flagged last quarter. Leia came in early the next day. I told her what we found. She didn't blink, just said, "Give me 20 minutes." She came back with 3 more. Same pattern. End of quarter bumps, nonsense scopes, no tangible deliverables, just oversight and audit fees with broad phrases like strategic alignment and vendor continuity. We didn't talk theory anymore. It was fact now. Tina didn't wait for consensus. She built a fake vendor shell. 1-page site, dummy email, invoice for $1,280. Legit looking, but just off enough to smell funny. We sent the test invoice through the usual system. Joseph moved it within the hour. He CC'd Tiffany from her personal Gmail. That was the tell. We brought in Detective Reed that afternoon. Evelyn insisted, said there were lines you didn't cross, and this one had been crossed 3 times over. Reed told Tina to keep acting normal. Don't tip anyone. Don't fire anyone yet. Just keep collecting. We mirrored the Gmail thread, exported the CC logs, printed everything with a timestamp. Leia notarized the copies. Company counsel verified chain of custody. Took 4 hours, and every second of it felt like defusing a bomb. Gordon showed up that night with a manila folder and a speech about second chances. Inside was a printed email chain from a clinic in New Jersey, plus a medical form half-filled. Letter had said Atlantic Specialty Care, but I recognized the logo from a last-year press kit. Hina didn't even open it. She called the clinic, asked for verification. The receptionist checked the date of birth and the name. No record, she said. Wrong branding, wrong format, and the number Gordon gave for the per round cost had changed again. First it was $14,800, then $9,600. Now it was just a lot. His math didn't hold water. Nothing did. She told him to pack a bag. He threw a fit. Knocked a small vase off the windowsill. One Evelyn had picked out from a roadside flea market. The kind of cheap thing that means something when it's been around long enough. You're cold, he said. Hina stood there quiet. No, I'm done. He left with a half-zipped duffel and no eye contact. Joseph showed up 2 days later, said he was just here for a ride. Like that explained anything. He walked in and found Leia, Tina, and one of the lawyers sitting at the dining table with hard copies of the vendor logs. I was at the counter reading timestamps off the mirrored inboxes. He stopped in the doorway, face blank, like a computer that just crashed. Hina didn't give him time to spin. We caught the invoice, the fake vendor, the Gmail CC. He tried to shift it fast. That was Tiffany. I didn't. She told me it was pre-cleared. I didn't know it wasn't. Hina slid the Slack log across the table. You did. His face cracked, eyes wide, mouth twitching like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find a grip. Then he cried. It wasn't an act. He broke in half right there, slid into the chair and covered his face with both hands. Said he was sorry. Said he didn't know how deep it had gotten. That Tiffany made him believe it was survival. That it was just smoothing edges. He gave up everything. The shared drives, the Dropbox folder he thought we didn't know about, backup receipts from his burner phone, even printouts of Slack DMs Tiffany had sent bragging about how she'd keep my boy Caleb where he belongs and how bad breaks are easier than bad PR. That one hit me in the ribs. I didn't react. Just kept my eyes on the logs. Hina stood up and walked to the hallway. She stood in silence for 2 minutes. Then she called her father. She told him flat, I have documented fraud, unauthorized vendor pipelines, and attempted harm. His sigh dragged through the speaker. If there's a way to slow roll this, we should. Appearances matter. The name matters. You're not just a person. You're a legacy. She didn't answer. He went on. If we take our time and manage this quietly, she cut him off. I'm recording this call. Silence for legal record, she added. One party consent. I've saved the file in 3 places. Goodbye, Dad. She hung up. Then she looked at me. I nodded. Let's remove it completely. The Northlight Press all hands was set for a Tuesday. 10 a.m. sharp, fluorescent humming, interim HR on the left, legal on the right. Tina at the front, blazer pressed, sleeves rolled, calm voice, eyes clear. She opened with a simple line. You deserve the full story. Then she laid it all out. Timeline, transactions, names, no euphemisms, no shielded terms. She didn't say errors or lapses in judgment. She called it what it was, fraud, collusion, endangerment. Leia took over for the vendor flows. She showed the paper trail like she'd rehearsed it in her sleep. 4 LLCs, dozens of invoices, a dozen pass-through accounts. She ended with a mirrored Slack message from Joseph, admitting he'd smoothed the process for a friend with family ties. People in the room stopped blinking. Detective Reed stood in the back, arms folded, next to a county officer in plain clothes. They didn't move. Not until Tiffany was halfway through her rebuttal. She called the sting invoice entrapment, said it was innovation under pressure, and threw in that I was a scorned junior with delusions of legacy. That one almost made me laugh. I didn't. I just stepped forward, clicked the projector remote, and pulled up 4 vendor filings with her signature on every last one. Silence followed. Not long, but long enough to hear the breath leave her body. Then the cuffs came out. Joseph didn't look at me when he signed the cooperation agreement. He didn't apologize either, and I didn't expect him to. That's on him. By sundown, Gordon had posted a Notes app screenshot with the usual self-preservation script, vague mentions of mental health, pressure, and being led astray. Not one word about Tina, not one about the company. 2 clients dropped him that night. At 3:03 in the morning, he texted me. We were both victims of the same system. You more than anyone should understand that. I didn't reply. Nothing to say to a man who saw every wound as a stage light. Tina's father booked a press breakfast at a midtown club and sat behind a polished podium talking about a regrettable chapter in a proud company's history. He wore the usual flag pin, said all the right sentences, paused where he was supposed to. What stuck with people was the fact that Tina didn't stand behind him. Authors notice where you stand. Evelyn gave a speech 3 days later at a community center reading event. No script, no podium, just a small mic and a metal stand and her calm bookstore voice. "We pay full price for truth," she said. "No discounts for bloodlines." 10 minutes later, our team inbox lit up. 5 independent outlets wanted access to the Beacon slate. We built a fund for Mason, the kid who almost died in my place. We set the target at 25,000. It cleared 31,69 days. Anonymous donation at the top was a perfect match. Tina, I checked in on Barbara every other weekend. Eddie said she'd fallen twice in 3 weeks, even with the salt. I found a rehab facility 27 miles out, modest, clean, safe, and drove her there myself one Sunday morning. She wore 2 coats and called me an unclaimed blessing in front of the intake nurse. Just before I left, she squeezed my good hand and said, "Your grandma would be proud. She raised you square." I didn't say anything, just nodded. Hank Wells left a voicemail 2 nights later. "Saw you on that live panel," he said. "Don't go Hollywood on me, you hear? You start wearing scarves indoors. I'm taking your name off the fishing plaque." I laughed harder than I had in weeks. By the end of the month, the Beacon slate wasn't an idea anymore. It was real. Whiteboards, active contracts, phone lines that rang, the smell of cheap coffee, and dry erase markers. We took turns restocking paper. We walked over to pick up our own lunches. Nothing glossy, nothing inflated, just honest work. The kind that washes you clean if you let it. I was folding laundry. Last load, shirt still warm when she knocked. No driver, no assistant, no carefully worded subject line. Just Tina standing in the doorway of my 1-bedroom in that black coat she wore when it mattered. Hair pulled back, no makeup, no armor. Same look she gave me in the lobby that first week. The one that said, "I've already made up my mind." I opened the door and stepped aside. She walked in slow, looked around the place like she was seeing it for the first time. Books stacked 2 deep on the shelves, the payas plant still trailing across the window ledge, scar on the countertop from when I left a hot pan too close to the edge. She touched the back of a dining chair and said, "It looks like you." And I knew she meant it the way nobody had ever meant it before. She turned to face me. "I don't want a life built for other people. I don't want deals that rot my hands. I don't want the kind of love you hide because the timing is messy." I didn't say anything yet. She wasn't done. "I want something clean. Us on paper in daylight." It hit me low. Not in a painful way, just deep like breath you forgot you were holding. I thought about my grandma sitting on the back steps in winter, cigarette in one hand, thermos of weak coffee in the other. She used to say, "You can call it gut if it helps, but some of us get given extra eyes. Use them for good." I spent years pretending I didn't have them or worse, ignoring what they saw. So, I told Tina the truth. "I can't promise I'll always see what's coming, but if I do, I'll tell you, even if it costs me something." She smiled, soft and sure. "Deal," she said. We sat down at the table, no ceremony, talked like people who had work to do and didn't want to screw it up. We made lists, not dreams, terms. The kind of contracts we'd sign and the kind we wouldn't. How we'd write payment clauses on the 1st and 15th. No floats, no delay buffers, formal anti-kickback language in every single vendor agreement. Transparency in author splits, no shortcuts, no favors, no soft promises at conferences that turned into bad math 6 months later. We kept it real. I told her I'd finalized my exit from Northlight. All the paperwork was signed, boxed, and copied. She told me she'd sent her father the audio file. He'd gone quiet. No follow-up, no media spin. She'd resigned her board seat. Formally dissolved the engagement with Gordon in writing. No loopholes. The townhouse was hers now. Clean. We didn't toast. No playlist. No dancing in the kitchen. We ordered dumplings from a place on 9th Street and ate them on the floor with our backs against the couch. She took my hand halfway through a sesame ball and I could feel the blood moving under my skin where the frost had once burned it stiff. Not a word was said about the past. Just 2 people in a quiet room on a bare floor making steady choices. I used to think a good ending needed spectacle, confetti, applause, some kind of headline. Turns out a good ending can look like a quiet Tuesday. Like steam off takeout, like someone reaching for your hand without asking. It's enough. And if that same heat rises in my chest again, the one I've spent most of my life pushing down, I won't run from it. I won't give it a fake name. I'll call it what it is, and I'll follow it. Story 3. I warned my wife. If you invite your male boss to your birthday, I'm out. She did and gave him the "my most special guest" tag. When she got back, her boss stormed in screaming about the company. His lawyer just called me. What did you make him do? You'd think after 6 years of marriage, my wife Camille would know I don't bluff. I'm not one of those guys who throws around empty threats like confetti at a New Year's party. When I say something, I mean it with the full weight of my law degree and the emotional exhaustion of a man who's been watching his marriage circle the drain like bathwater that just won't quite disappear. So, when I looked her dead in the eyes over our overpriced artisanal coffee one Tuesday morning and said, "If you invite your boss to your birthday party, I'm out," it wasn't a cute line delivered for dramatic effect. It wasn't me being jealous or insecure or whatever pop psychology term she'd probably Google later to justify ignoring me. It was a survival warning, the kind you give someone before they step on a landmine disguised as a LinkedIn connection. But of course, she laughed. Not a small polite chuckle either. No, this was a full-blown head-thrown backhand like I just told her the punchline to the world's funniest joke. "Relax, Mason," she said, waving her hand dismissively while scrolling through her phone with the other, probably already adding Grant to the guest list in her head. "He's just my mentor," she said the word mentor the way someone might say Gandhi or Oprah, like this man was some kind of enlightened business guru who descended from the corporate heavens to bless her career with his infinite wisdom. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking mentors don't typically text at midnight with messages like, "Don't forget the red dress." My favorite. But hey, what do I know? I'm just the husband, the guy who pays half the mortgage and apparently exists solely to nod along to whatever fantasy narrative she's spinning this week. Yeah, mentors, right? Because nothing says professional development quite like a married man reminding a married woman what color dress he wants to see her in. I'm sure that's covered extensively in all those leadership seminars she's always attending. Probably right after Synergy and before Paradigm Shifts. The whole thing made my skin crawl. But pointing that out would have just earned me another lecture about how I don't understand office dynamics and how networking is crucial in marketing. Sure, sweetheart. Network away. Just don't be surprised when your network starts looking suspiciously like an affair waiting to happen. I could already see the disaster forming in real time, like watching a loading bar fill up on the world's worst download. 1 dot, 2 dots, full signal, connection complete. Welcome to hell, population, your marriage. Camille had this irritating habit of mistaking attention for admiration. Like, she genuinely couldn't tell the difference between someone respecting her professional abilities and someone just wanting to get in her pants. To her, every compliment was genuine. Every lingering glance was appreciation for her innovative campaign strategies, and every late-night text was just her boss being really committed to the team's success. Meanwhile, I'm over here with a front-row seat to what's basically a slow-motion car crash. And I've got the habit of pretending to care about her office drama because that's what you do when you're married, right? You listen, you nod, you make supportive noises while internally calculating how much a good divorce attorney costs these days. That night, while Camille sat on our couch surrounded by laptop screens and notebook paper like some kind of party planning general orchestrating a military operation, ordering metallic balloons and a custom cake shaped like her initials because apparently in fondant is the peak of sophistication. I was ordering something else entirely, something she wouldn't see coming because she was too busy debating whether rose gold or champagne gold better matched her aesthetic. I pulled up my laptop, opened a secure browser, and started drafting an email to my firm's legal review department. Because here's the thing about being married to a marketing director who flirts for sport and treats professional boundaries like suggestions rather than rules. You keep receipts, you document, you prepare. Call it paranoid if you want, but I prefer the term strategically cautious. I've spent the last 6 years watching Camille navigate her career with the ethical flexibility of a yoga instructor, bending rules I didn't even know existed. She's charming. I'll give her that. She can walk into a room and have everyone eating out of her hand within 5 minutes, laughing at her jokes, agreeing with her ideas, generally acting like she's the most fascinating person they've ever encountered. It's a gift really. A gift that served her well professionally and made my life a special kind of complicated personally. Because when you're that good at performing, at making people believe whatever version of reality you're selling, the lines start to blur. What's real? What's strategy? What's just Camille being Camille? And what's Camille actively making terrible decisions that'll blow up in both our faces? I didn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out where this birthday party situation was heading. Grant Whitmore, her boss, the guy who signs her paychecks and apparently her self-esteem, was going to show up. He was going to bring some expensive, thoughtful gift that proved he really knows her. He was going to make some toast or speech that walked right up to the line of inappropriate without quite crossing it. Because guys like Grant are masters at plausible deniability. And Camille was going to glow under all that attention like she'd been plugged into an outlet completely oblivious or maybe just willfully ignorant to how the whole thing looked, how it made me feel, how it made us look as a couple. But fine, she wanted to throw her party. She wanted Grant there. Who was I to stand in the way of her special day? I'm not a monster. I'm not going to ruin her birthday by throwing a tantrum or issuing ultimatums. She'd just ignore anyway. No, I'd do something much smarter. I prepare because Grant Whitmore wasn't just her boss. Grant Whitmore was the CEO of Whitmore & Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm that had recently landed on my company's radar for some questionable financial practices. Nothing concrete yet, just whispers, red flags, the kind of thing that makes compliance attorneys like me start digging. And wouldn't you know it, I'd just been assigned to the preliminary review. Conflict of interest. Absolutely. The kind that could tank someone's career if not properly disclosed and managed. The kind that made a wife posting Instagram photos tagged with most special guests look really, really bad for everyone involved. Did Camille know this? Of course not. She never asked about my work, never cared beyond vague questions about whether I had a good day or a stressful day. She had no idea I was currently knee-deep in files that could potentially send her precious mentor straight to corporate hell. So, while she hummed along to whatever pop song was playing through her earbuds, addressing invitation envelopes in her perfectly looped handwriting, I was opening secure documents, and making notes just in case, just because I'm the kind of guy who likes having options, who likes being 10 steps ahead, who refuses to be the idiot husband who didn't see it coming. Call it petty, call it calculating, call it whatever you want. I call it insurance. Camille's birthday party looked like what would happen if a corporate mixer and an Instagram influencer's dream wedding had a baby. And that baby had unlimited access to her father's credit card. I'm talking champagne fountains, plural, because apparently one wasn't enough to properly celebrate turning 32. There was a live band playing jazzy versions of pop songs. The kind of music that makes you feel like you're in a fancy hotel lobby waiting for someone important who's never going to show up. The lighting was so dramatically arranged with purple and gold uplights strategically placed around our backyard that even the cocktail shrimp on the appetizer table looked like they'd been professionally photographed for a food magazine. Everything had this glossy, overly polished sheen to it, like Camille had hired someone whose entire job description was make everything look expensive on social media, which knowing my wife, she probably did. This wasn't just a birthday party. This was content. This was her chance to prove to everyone following her perfectly curated Instagram account that she was living her best life, that she was successful and admired and surrounded by people who absolutely definitely weren't just there for the free premium alcohol. I stood near the bar because if I was going to watch this train wreck unfold, I was going to need something stronger than the cucumber water the catering staff kept trying to push on everyone and observe the guest list with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying a particularly bizarre tribe. There were her coworkers all dressed like they were attending a charity gala instead of a backyard barbecue that had gotten seriously out of hand. There were the neighbors looking uncomfortable and overdressed, probably wondering why they'd been invited to what was clearly not a neighborhood-friendly event. And there were the influencer friends, the ones who'd shown up with ring lights and phone tripods, already filming everything for their stories. I nursed my whiskey and watched Camille work the crowd like a politician on election night, touching arms, throwing her head back in exaggerated laughter, making everyone feel like they were the most important person she'd talked to all evening. It was impressive, really in a deeply exhausting sort of way. She was wearing the red dress. Of course, she was wearing the red dress. The one Grant had texted about. The one that probably cost more than our monthly utility bill. The one that hugged every curve and made sure nobody at this party could possibly forget whose birthday it was. Her hair was done in those perfectly imperfect waves that take 2 hours and a professional to achieve. And her makeup looked like it had been applied by someone who charged by the minute. She looked stunning. She always looked stunning. That was never the problem. The problem walked in at 8:15, fashionably late because men like Grant Whitmore think making an entrance is a personality trait. I saw him before Camille did. Watched him pause at the entrance to our backyard like he was waiting for a spotlight to find him. And I swear to God, I felt my blood pressure spike so hard my Apple Watch probably logged it as a workout. Grant Whitmore had the charisma of an expired credit card and the charm of a parking ticket you find on your windshield after you've already had a terrible day. He was one of those guys who thought confidence meant walking around like the world owed him something. Like everyone should be grateful he'd grace them with his presence. He strutted, and I do mean strutted, like a rooster who'd just won a cockfight, into the party, wearing sunglasses indoors because apparently his eyes were too important to be subjected to our tastefully arranged string lights. He was holding a gift bag, One of those oversized designer ones with rope handles and tissue paper exploding out the top. Like a particularly aggressive flower arrangement, carrying it like it contained the secrets of the universe, or maybe the Holy Grail, or at the very least something that cost more than my car payment. His suit probably cost $3,000, tailored to within an inch of its life, the kind of thing you wear when you need everyone to know you make more money than them. His hair was slicked back with what I assumed was some kind of premium hair product that cost $40 an ounce. And he had that perpetual smirk that guys develop when they've spent too long believing their own hype. I watched Camille's face light up when she spotted him, watched her excuse herself from whatever conversation she was pretending to care about, and practically float across the yard to greet him. They hugged too long, too familiar. The kind of hug that makes everyone watching feel like they're intruding on something private. He said something in her ear that made her laugh. That real laugh she used to say for me back when we still had things to laugh about together. Then he handed her the gift bag with this theatrical flourish like he was presenting her with an Oscar, and I had to grip my whiskey glass a little tighter to keep from throwing it. The party continued around me like I was a rock in a stream. People flowing past, music playing, conversations happening in that loud talking way people do when they've had 2 drinks and think they're more interesting than they actually are. Camille's friend Monica came up to me at one point, already tipsy, and said something about how lucky Camille is to have such a supportive husband, and I smiled and nodded and wanted to ask her if she'd recently suffered a head injury. Supportive, right? Because standing here watching my wife's boss treat our home like his personal networking event was exactly the kind of support I'd always dreamed of providing. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. The one I'd known was coming since the moment Grant walked in with his stupid sunglasses and his stupid gift bag. Camille climbed onto a chair like she was running for office, and clinked her champagne glass with one of those little forks they provide at fancy events for this exact purpose. The crowd quieted down, faces turning toward her with varying degrees of interest and inebriation. She was glowing, absolutely radiant with attention and champagne, and the thrill of being the center of everyone's universe for one night. And then she opened her mouth and said the words that would later play on repeat in my head during every sleepless night that followed. "I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate with me," she began, her voice carrying across the yard with the practiced ease of someone who gives presentations for a living. "But there's someone special I need to recognize. Someone who's been such an incredible mentor, supporter, and friend." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly where this was going. Could see the train wreck about to happen in slow motion, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it. "Grant, could you come up here?" She extended her hand toward him like a queen summoning a knight. And he obliged. Of course, he obliged. Moving through the crowd with that insufferable confidence while people clapped politely, probably confused about who he was and why he was getting special recognition at someone's birthday party. Camille raised her glass higher, smiled bright enough to power a small city, and delivered the final blow. "To my most special guest, Grant. Thank you for everything you do, for believing in me, for pushing me to be better. I wouldn't be where I am without you." The crowd cheered and raised their glasses, completely oblivious to what had just happened, to what those words meant, to how they sounded coming out of a married woman's mouth in front of her husband. But I heard it. I felt it. You could have heard my dignity pack its things. Call an Uber and leave the premises entirely. It was the sound of something breaking. Not dramatically or loudly, but with that quiet finality of a door closing for the last time. I didn't make a scene. That's not my style. And besides, what would it accomplish? Screaming at my wife in front of 50 people while Grant stood there smirking. No, thanks. I had a better plan. One that required patience and precision rather than emotional outbursts. So, I smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. The kind that feels like it might crack your face in half. I finished my whiskey in one long swallow, set the glass down on the nearest table with deliberate care, and walked over to where Camille was still standing on that chair. Still basking in her moment. I leaned in close enough that only she could hear me over the music and conversation that had resumed, and whispered 2 words, "Happy birthday." Then I walked out. Not dramatically, not with a door slam or a speech or any of the theatrical exits people expect when someone's had enough. Just efficiently, purposefully, like I was clocking out of a terrible job at the end of a shift I should have quit years ago. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, stepped through our house, past the catering staff cleaning in the kitchen, past the coats piled on our bed, past all the evidence of a party I'd never wanted, and got in my car. The music and laughter faded as I pulled out of the driveway. And for the first time in hours, possibly months, I felt like I could actually breathe. Camille didn't call that night. Not even a "where are you" text, not a "are you okay?" Not even one of those passive-aggressive question marks that wives send when they're annoyed but trying to pretend they're not. Nothing. Radio silence. Complete and total communication blackout. Like I'd driven off the edge of the earth and she hadn't even noticed the absence of gravity. I guess when you're the star of your own birthday movie, when you're the leading lady in the romantic comedy playing exclusively in your head, the director's husband doesn't really matter. I was what they call in the film industry background talent. The guy who's technically in the scene, but could be replaced by literally anyone and nobody would notice or care. Hell, I could have been played by a cardboard cutout and it would have had the same emotional impact on the evening's festivities. I drove around for a while after I left, not really going anywhere specific, just putting distance between myself and that backyard circus. I ended up at a 24-hour diner off the highway. The kind of place that smells like coffee and broken dreams, where the waitresses call you hon and don't ask questions when a guy in a button-down shirt shows up alone at 10:30 on a Saturday night looking like he's just witnessed his own funeral. I ordered coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Clinton administration and sat in a corner booth watching my phone not light up with messages from my wife. It was almost fascinating in a morbid sort of way, watching the minutes tick by and realizing that she genuinely didn't care where I was or whether I was coming back. She was probably still at the party, still holding court, still laughing at Grant's jokes, and pretending that everything was absolutely perfect in her meticulously curated life. But while she was cutting cake, probably a vanilla bean situation with buttercream frosting and those little edible flowers that cost $8 each, I was cutting ties quietly, methodically with the cold precision of a surgeon removing something malignant. See, the thing about being a corporate attorney is that you learn pretty quickly how to protect yourself, how to move assets, how to build walls that look invisible until someone tries to climb over them. I pulled out my laptop right there in that sad little diner, connected to the VPN on my phone and got to work. First order of business, our joint credit card, the one we'd opened 3 years ago because Camille insisted that shared finances are healthy for a marriage, and I'd been stupid enough to believe that meant we were building something together instead of giving her unlimited access to my credit limit. I logged into the account, navigated to the card management section, and hit the freeze button with the kind of satisfaction most people reserve for popping bubble wrap. Frozen. Done. Every transaction she tried to make from this point forward would be declined, and she'd have to call the bank to figure out why, and they'd tell her that the primary account holder, that would be me, had restricted access. Then I moved on to my business account, the one with my consulting fees and my salary direct deposits, and rerouted everything to a new account I'd opened last month at a completely different bank. Call it paranoid, call it petty, call it whatever makes you feel better, but I call it smart. I'd watched too many guys get cleaned out by wives who suddenly decided that what's yours is mine applied to bank accounts, but not to loyalty or respect. The locks were next on my list. And yeah, I know that sounds dramatic, like something out of a daytime talk show where everyone's screaming and throwing chairs, but hear me out. Our house is in my name. I bought it 2 years before I met Camille back when I was a junior associate pulling 80-hour weeks and living on takeout and ambition. When we got married, I added her to the title because that's what you do when you love someone and trust them and think you're building a future together. But the mortgage, that's all me, buddy. Every payment, every repair, every time something breaks and needs fixing, that's my money, my credit, my problem. So, changing the locks on my own house wasn't some psychotic power play. It was a boundary. Remember boundaries? Camille loved talking about boundaries in therapy. Loved throwing that word around like it was a magic spell that would fix everything wrong with us. We need better boundaries, Mason. Well, sweetheart, a new deadbolt is about as clear a boundary as it gets. I made a call to a 24-hour locksmith because apparently everything in this city operates around the clock to accommodate people having emotional breakdowns and arranged for them to come out first thing in the morning. Cash payment, receipt under a different name, the works. They probably thought I was paranoid or having an affair or running from the mob, but they didn't ask questions and I didn't volunteer information. That's the beautiful thing about paying people well. They stop caring about why you need their services and just focus on providing them. But the real masterpiece, the piece to resistance of my late-night strategic planning session was the email. I sat there in that diner booth with my terrible coffee and my laptop and composed what I can only describe as a work of art disguised as professional correspondence. Subject line, conflict of interest, urgent, short, professional, the kind of thing that makes people's hearts skip a beat when they see it in their inbox because they know it's not going to be good news. In the body of the email, I kept it brief and devastating. Her company policy regarding conflicts of interest and potential ethics violations. I'm submitting formal disclosure of a personal relationship that may impact the ongoing Whitmore and Associates review. Attached. Please find photographic evidence requiring immediate assessment by the ethics committee and senior partners. And then, because I'm nothing if not thorough, I attached a photo. Not just any photo, the perfect photo, the one that someone had posted to Instagram and tagged both Camille and Grant in because people are so obsessed with documenting every moment of their lives that they create evidence without even realizing it. There they were, my wife and her mentor, smiling at each other like they were the only two people at the party. His hand on her waist, her hand on his arm. Both of them holding champagne glasses and looking for all the world, like a couple celebrating their anniversary instead of a boss and his employee at a birthday party that happened to include her husband somewhere in the background, probably looking miserable. The beauty of the photo was its ambiguity. It didn't show them kissing or doing anything explicitly inappropriate, but it showed enough. The body language, the proximity, the casual intimacy of two people who were way too comfortable with each other. And in the context of a company under legal review for potential fraud, with me as one of the reviewing attorneys and her as an employee of that company who just publicly declared her boss her most special guest. That photo was a grenade with the pin already pulled, and I just lobbed it directly into the ethics committee's inbox. I addressed the email to 3 people, my direct supervisor, the head of our legal review department, and the company's ethics officer. Then I hovered over the send button for exactly 30 seconds, giving myself time to reconsider, to think about whether I really wanted to do this, whether I was overreacting, whether maybe I should just go home and try to talk to Camille like a rational adult in a functional marriage. But then I remembered her standing on that chair raising her glass to Grant, calling him her most special guest, while I stood there like a ghost at my own wife's party, and I clicked send with zero regrets. The email whooshed off into the digital void, and I closed my laptop with the satisfaction of someone who just finished a particularly challenging puzzle. It was nearly midnight by then, and the diner was emptying out except for a couple of truckers and a woman who looked like she was hiding from her own life in a corner booth similar to mine. I paid my bill, left a generous tip because the waitress had kept my coffee cup full without trying to make conversation, and headed to a hotel, not a fancy one. I wasn't trying to make some grand statement or live it up like I was on vacation. Just a clean, quiet place with a bed and a lock on the door and absolutely zero chance of running into my wife. I checked in using my business credit card, the one Camille didn't have access to, and took the elevator up to a room on the 4th floor that smelled like industrial cleaning products and had art on the walls that looked like someone had sneezed paint onto a canvas and called it abstract expressionism. I kicked off my shoes, loosened my tie, and lay down on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling and waiting for guilt or regret or some kind of emotional response to hit me. But it never came. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Relief. Pure, uncomplicated relief, like I'd been holding my breath underwater and finally broken the surface. My phone sat on the nightstand, still silent, still absent of any messages from Camille, and I realized I didn't care anymore. The silence didn't hurt. It was just confirmation of what I'd already known, that I'd stopped matching to her a long time ago, and she'd stopped matching to me somewhere along the way, too. For days. That's how long it took for Camille to notice I hadn't come home. 4 whole days of her living her best life, posting Instagram stories from the office, sharing motivational quotes about boss babes and women who hustle, presumably basking in the afterglow of her spectacular birthday party while I sat in a moderately depressing hotel room, eating room service, and watching cable news like a divorced dad in a mid-budget drama. 4 days of absolute radio silence, no calls, no texts, no hey, are you alive check-ins, nothing. It was almost impressive really. The level of obliviousness required to not notice your husband has essentially vanished from your life. But then again, Camille had always been exceptional at ignoring things that didn't fit into her carefully constructed narrative. So why should my absence be any different? When she finally did show up at the house, our house, my house, the distinction was about to become very important. It was late afternoon on a Thursday. I'd taken the day off work, told my assistant I had some personal matters to handle, which was the understatement of the century. I was sitting in the living room, my living room, with a glass of bourbon that was probably too expensive to be drinking at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but felt entirely appropriate given the circumstances. I'd spent the morning arranging things, making sure everything was exactly where it needed to be, setting the stage for what was about to be either the most satisfying or most disastrous conversation of my marriage, possibly both. I heard her before I saw her, heard the click-clack of her heels on the front walkway, that confident stride she had, the walk of someone who'd just crushed a presentation or closed a deal, or maybe just received another midnight text from her mentor telling her how special she was. She was humming, actually humming like she'd just won Employee of the Year or gotten a promotion or discovered the secret to eternal happiness in the bottom of a champagne flute. The sound drifted through the door, muffled but unmistakable, and I took another sip of bourbon and waited. The door opened. She still had her old key, the one that was about to become a very expensive souvenir. And she breathed in like she owned the place, which legally speaking, she sort of did, but we'd get to that in a minute. She tossed her designer purse onto the couch, the kind of bag that costs more than some people's monthly rent, and always seemed to be spilling receipts and lipsticks and those little sample perfumes she collected from department stores. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. Her outfit screamed, "I'm important and successful and definitely not going through a marital crisis." She looked happy, genuinely, annoyingly, obliviously happy. "Did you miss me?" she asked, her voice dripping with that playful tone she used when she thought she was being charming. Like this was all just a minor misunderstanding. Like, I'd stormed off after a little argument. And now we were going to kiss and make up and pretend everything was fine. Like, the last 4 days hadn't happened. Like her birthday party hadn't been a masterclass in humiliation. Like we were still playing happy marriage instead of whatever twisted game this had become. I looked at her over the rim of my glass, taking my time, letting the silence stretch out until it got uncomfortable. "Sure," I finally said, my voice flat and emotionless as concrete, like I miss food poisoning or jury duty or that time I had to get a root canal without enough anesthesia. Her smile faltered just a little bit. Confusion flickering across her face like she wasn't quite sure if I was joking or not. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. She opened her mouth to respond, probably to laugh it off or make some witty comeback. But then she noticed something. I saw it happen in real time. Watched her brain process the information. Saw the exact moment the confusion turned to realization. Her key was still in her hand. The old key, the one she just used to try to open the door. Except the door had already been unlocked when she turned the knob. She'd used her key, turned it, felt it move in the lock, but something had felt wrong. "Different elf, Mason," she said slowly, looking from the key in her hand to the door and back to me. Did you change the locks?" Her voice had lost that playful edge, replaced by something harder, sharper, like she was starting to understand that maybe this wasn't going to be the easy reconciliation she'd apparently been expecting. Her smile twitched at the corners, trying to hold its shape, but starting to crack around the edges. "Boundaries, remember," I said, settling back into the couch like I was explaining basic arithmetic to a particularly slow student. "You said they're healthy. You said we needed better boundaries in our marriage. I think those were your exact words during our last therapy session, which you skipped, by the way. So, I took your advice, and honestly, you were right. Boundaries are incredibly healthy, life-changing, even. I should have listened to you years ago." She just stood there frozen in the entryway with her expensive purse and her designer shoes and her perfectly styled hair, looking like someone had just told her that gravity was optional, and she wasn't sure whether to be excited or terrified. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. Trying to figure out if this was some kind of elaborate joke, some test she was supposed to pass. Some game with rules she didn't understand. But this wasn't a game. Games have winners and losers. And at this point, we'd both already lost. I was just making sure the final score was accurately recorded. "I don't understand," she said. And for the first time and maybe ever, she sounded genuinely uncertain. Camille was never uncertain. She was confident, assured, always ready with an answer or an excuse or a perfectly crafted explanation for whatever situation she found herself in. But right now, standing in the doorway of a house she could no longer access without my permission, she looked lost. "Let me help you with that," I said, gesturing to the coffee table where a thick brown envelope sat, her name written across the front in my handwriting. It had been sitting there for an hour, positioned perfectly so she couldn't miss it, couldn't pretend she hadn't seen it, couldn't make excuses later about how she didn't know or didn't understand. "There's some reading material for you. Consider it a belated birthday gift since I apparently didn't get you anything memorable at your party. Well, except for the gift of my absence, but that doesn't really come with a card." She moved toward the table like she was approaching a bomb that might detonate if she breathed wrong. Picked up the envelope with hands that I noticed were shaking slightly. Good. She should be nervous. She opened it carefully, pulled out the papers inside, and I watched her eyes scan the first page, then the second, then back to the first. Like maybe she'd misread something. Like maybe this was all some terrible mistake that would clear itself up if she just looked at it from a different angle. This is our prenup," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's different. These terms." She looked up at me, her face gone pale under her foundation, all that confidence and swagger evaporating like water on hot pavement. "Mason, what is this?" "That's the updated version," I explained, taking another leisurely sip of my bourbon. "The one we signed a year ago when we refinanced the house. Remember you were so busy with that big campaign launch and I told you we needed to sign some paperwork for the ROFI and you said, and I quote, 'I trust you with anything babe, just tell me where to sign.' So I did. I told you where to sign and you signed right there at the bottom of page 6 and again on page 12 and once more on page 18. Your signature's all over this thing, very official, very legal, very much enforceable in any court in the state. She flipped through the pages frantically now, not really reading anymore, just looking for something that would make this make sense. Some loophole or escape hatch or evidence that this was all some elaborate misunderstanding. But this says, Mason, this says I'm not entitled to anything. The house, your retirement accounts, your business assets, everything's protected. This isn't what we agreed to when we got married. This isn't. You're absolutely right. I interrupted, standing up and walking over to where she stood, close enough to see the panic starting to bloom in her eyes. This isn't what we agreed to when we got married. When we got married, we agreed to be faithful. We agreed to be partners. We agreed to respect each other and prioritize our relationship over our careers and not invite our bosses to birthday parties and call them our most special guests while our husbands stand in the corner like decorative plants. But then things changed, didn't they? Circumstances evolved. Situations developed and I adapted accordingly. You tricked me, she whispered, clutching the papers like they might transform into something else if she held them tight enough. You lied to me. You told me this was for the refinance. I told you we needed to sign paperwork for the refinance. I corrected, which was true. We didn't need to sign refinance paperwork. We also needed to sign an updated prenup, which I mentioned was included in the documents. You just didn't bother to read what you were signing because you were too busy, too distracted, too confident that I'd never do anything that wasn't completely in your best interest. You said you trusted me with anything, Camille. So, I trusted that you wouldn't read the fine print. Turns out we were both right. Camille tried pretending nothing happened for approximately 18 hours, which was actually longer than I'd expected given her usual inability to confront reality when it didn't align with her preferred narrative. She spent that night in the guest room, which was generous of me to allow, considering she technically had no legal right to be in my house anymore, but I'm not a complete monster, and emerged the next morning acting like we just had a minor disagreement about where to go for dinner rather than a nuclear detonation of our marriage. She made coffee, did her makeup, got dressed in one of those power suits she wore when she needed to feel in control, and headed off to work like everything was absolutely fine, and we definitely weren't 2 signatures away from divorce proceedings. I, meanwhile, worked from home that day because I had a feeling things were about to get interesting and I wanted a front row seat to the implosion. I set myself up in the home office with my laptop, a fresh pot of coffee, and the kind of anticipation you get right before a really good plot twist in a movie you've been waiting months to see. I'd sent that email 4 days ago, for days for it to circulate through the proper channels, for the ethics committee to convene, for people way above my pay grade to start asking uncomfortable questions about conflicts of interest and professional boundaries, and why exactly one of their reviewing attorneys had a wife who was publicly celebrating her boss while said boss was under investigation for financial misconduct. These things take time, bureaucracy being what it is, but I knew the clock was ticking. It was just a matter of when, not if. The call came at 10:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was watching the clock like a kid on Christmas Eve, except instead of waiting for Santa, I was waiting for karma to show up with receipts and a really bad attitude. I heard Camille's phone ring from where I sat in my office. Heard her answer it in that professional voice she used for work calls, all crisp and efficient and ready to solve whatever problem had come up. Camille Harper speaking, she said like she was auditioning for the role of successful marketing executive in a corporate training video. Then I heard the screaming, not her screaming, Grant screaming. I couldn't make out the exact words from where I sat, but I didn't need to. The tone was unmistakable. That specific pitch of panic mixed with rage that people hit when their entire world is crumbling and they need someone to blame. It was beautiful. Honestly, like listening to a symphony composed entirely of consequences. I took a sip of my coffee, perfectly brewed, strong enough to wake the dead, exactly the way I liked it, and waited. What? Grant, slow down. I can't. Camille's voice cut through the house, confusion turning to alarm. What do you mean the company? What lawyer? Grant, you're not making any sense. More screaming from his end, loud enough that I could hear it even though I wasn't on the call. Could hear him absolutely losing his mind in real time. What did you do? The company, his lawyer, just called me. Perfect timing. Absolutely perfect. I couldn't have choreographed it better if I tried. I imagine Grant in his corner office probably pacing back and forth in his $3,000 suit. His hair no longer perfectly slicked back, his composure completely shattered as he realized that his company was under serious legal scrutiny. And it was all connected to a stupid birthday party where he'd gotten too comfortable, too cocky, too careless about boundaries and optics and the basic professional standards that exist for exactly this reason. See, here's what had happened. While Camille was busy pretending everything was fine and Grant was probably busy sending inappropriate midnight texts to other employees, My email had made its way through the proper channels. The ethics committee had reviewed the photo, cross-referenced it with the ongoing investigation into Whitmore and Associates and realized they had a major problem. One of their attorneys, me, was married to an employee of a company under review. And that employee had publicly and enthusiastically demonstrated a personal relationship with the CEO of said company. That's not just a conflict of interest. That's an ethics violation so obvious you could see it from space. So, they'd done what any responsible legal department would do. They'd escalate. They'd notified senior partners who'd notified the company's general counsel, who'd immediately started damage control procedures, which meant pulling me off the Whitmore and Associates review, not as punishment, just as standard conflict protocol, and assigning new attorneys to the case. Fresh eyes, no personal connections, no reason to show favoritism or bias in either direction. And those new attorneys, unencumbered by any loyalty or personal relationship to anyone involved, had apparently found some very interesting things in Whitmore and Associates' financial records. Things that Grant had probably been hoping would stay buried under a mountain of paperwork and creative accounting. I heard footsteps, fast and frantic, coming toward my office. The door burst open and there was Camille, phone still clutched in her hand, her face pale and her eyes wide with the kind of panic that comes from finally understanding you've massively screwed up but having no idea how or why or what to do about it. "Mason," she said, her voice shaking. "Mason, Grant is freaking out. He's saying something about lawyers and investigations and the company freezing accounts. He's saying this is my fault that we," she stopped, swallowed hard, her brain clearly working overtime to connect dots she should have seen coming from a mile away. "What did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, cradling my coffee mug, and gave her my best impression of innocent confusion. "Me? I didn't do anything. Well, nothing illegal anyway. I simply followed protocol. When I realized there might be a conflict of interest between my professional responsibilities and my personal life, I disclosed it to the appropriate parties. That's literally in my job description, Camille. It's what ethical attorneys do when they discover potential conflicts. I'm honestly surprised you're surprised. You're the one who's always talking about integrity and professional standards and doing the right thing, even when it's hard. You reported us." Her voice cracked on the last word, like the full weight of what was happening was finally sinking in. "You told them about Grant and me. I reported a potential conflict of interest. I corrected, enjoying this way more than I probably should have. I submitted photographic evidence of a personal relationship between an employee of a company under review and that company's CEO. The fact that the employee happens to be my wife is unfortunate but irrelevant. The fact that you chose to make that relationship very public, very obvious, and very questionable in terms of professional boundaries, well, that's on you, sweetheart. I just provided the documentation." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head, like the man she'd married had been replaced by a stranger who spoke the same language but operated according to completely different rules. "But you're ruining everything. Grant's company, my job, my career. Mason, they're going to think I'm involved in whatever they're investigating. They're going to think I knew something, that I was part of it." "Were you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Part of it? I mean, did you know Grant was cooking the books or fudging numbers or whatever creative financial gymnastics he was doing that attracted legal attention in the first place? Because if you did, you should probably lawyer up. Not with me, obviously, since I have that whole conflict of interest thing now. But maybe someone from another firm, someone who specializes in white-collar defense." "I didn't know anything," she practically shouted. Frustration and fear mixing into something close to hysteria. "I'm in marketing, Mason. I don't have anything to do with the financial side of the business. I just create campaigns and manage clients." And she stopped. Realization dawning. "This is revenge. You're doing this because of the party. Because I invited Grant because you're jealous and petty and jealous." I interrupted, setting my coffee down and standing up, walking toward her until we were face to face. "Camille, I'm not jealous. Jealousy requires caring about something enough to want to keep it. What I am is done. Done with being an afterthought in my own marriage. Done with watching you prioritize your boss over your husband. Done with being the guy who stands in the corner at parties while his wife toasts to someone else being her most special guest. This isn't revenge. This is consequences. There's a difference." Her phone rang again. Grant's name flashing on the screen and she looked at it like it was a live grenade. She didn't answer. Couldn't answer probably because what was she going to say? How is she going to explain that her husband had just professionally nuked both of them using nothing but proper legal protocol and a well-timed disclosure? The phone kept ringing, insistent and angry, and I could almost hear Grant on the other end screaming into the void, watching his company implode in real time because he'd been too arrogant to maintain appropriate boundaries with his employees. "You need to fix this," Camille whispered, her voice small and desperate. "Please, Mason, call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them there's no conflict. Tell them." "No," I said simply, returning to my chair and picking up my coffee. "I'm not fixing anything. This is the bed you made, Camille. Time to lie in it. Although, probably not in this house since legally speaking, you don't live here anymore. You might want to start looking at apartments. I hear there are some nice studios downtown, very affordable for someone who's about to be unemployed." Camille's office life crumbled faster than her gluten-free cake and with roughly the same level of dignity, which is to say none at all. It was actually impressive how quickly everything fell apart once the dominoes started tipping. Like watching a carefully constructed house of cards collapse in real time, except the cards were made of bad decisions and professional misconduct. Within 48 hours of Grant's panic call, her entire career was in free fall and I had the best seat in the house to watch it all go down. Not because I was actively involved. I'd already played my part by following proper legal protocol, but because Camille, in her infinite wisdom, kept coming back to the house to tell me about every new catastrophe like I was her therapist instead of the husband she'd publicly humiliated. The first major blow came when their biggest client, some tech startup that sold overpriced smart home devices nobody needed, pulled their account, just completely ghosted the agency, sent a tour email about reevaluating their marketing partnerships in light of recent developments, and took their six-figure annual contract somewhere else. Apparently, when you're a startup trying to convince investors you're legitimate and professional, you don't want to be associated with a marketing firm whose CEO is under investigation for financial fraud and whose marketing director is splashed all over social media calling that CEO her most special guest. Bad optics, as Camille would say. Really, really bad optics. Then another client left, then another. It was like rats abandoning a sinking ship, except the rats were Fortune 500 companies and wellness brands and boutique hotels. All of them suddenly very concerned about their reputation and very eager to distance themselves from Whitmore and Associates before the stink of scandal stuck to them too. Camille tried to do damage control, sent emails assuring clients that she had nothing to do with the investigation, that her work was completely separate from any financial improprieties, that they could trust her to continue delivering exceptional results. But trust is a funny thing. Once it's broken, it's really hard to glue back together, especially when the person asking you to trust them has recently demonstrated spectacularly poor judgment in both their personal and professional life. HR got involved next because of course they did. When you work at a company that's under legal investigation and you're publicly connected to the CEO in ways that look decidedly unprofessional, HR tends to take an interest in your activities. They flagged her profile for review, which is corporate speak for we're building a file on you in case we need to fire you without getting sued. They started asking questions about her relationship with Grant, about whether any of her projects or promotions had been influenced by their personal connection, about whether she'd ever received preferential treatment or inappropriate communications. All very professional, all very by the book, all very much the beginning of the end. Camille insisted she had nothing to hide, which was hilarious coming from someone who'd been hiding midnight texts from her boss for months. She sat through meetings with HR representatives who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes, who took notes on everything she said and probably didn't believe a word of it. She came home, well, to my home since it definitely wasn't hers anymore, ranting about how unfair it all was, how she was being persecuted for something she didn't do, how this was all a massive overreaction to a simple birthday party. It was just a party, Mason. She'd scream at me while I made dinner and pretended to listen. People invite their bosses to parties all the time. It's called networking. Sure, I'd say, not looking up from the vegetables I was chopping. People also call their bosses most special guests all the time. Totally normal, completely professional. Nothing weird about that at all. The sarcasm was so thick you could spread it on toast. But Camille was apparently immune to subtext at this point. But the real nail in the coffin, the thing that transformed this from a professional disaster into a full-blown career extinction event, came courtesy of a blog called Corporate Confessions. If you've never heard of Corporate Confessions, congratulations. You probably have better things to do with your time than read anonymous workplace drama on the internet. It's basically a gossip site for office workers where people submit stories about their terrible bosses and incompetent coworkers and inappropriate office relationships, all under the protective shield of anonymity. Think of it as therapy for people who can't afford actual therapy but can afford unlimited data plans. Someone, and I have my suspicions about who, though I'd never admit it in a court of law, submitted the story of Camille's birthday party to Corporate Confessions. And not just a bland summary either. This was a full expose complete with photos from Instagram, screenshots of Camille's toast to Grant, A detailed timeline of events, and some truly spectacular commentary about professional boundaries, and what happens when you mix personal ambition with terrible judgment. The article went live on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon it had been shared approximately 8,000 times across LinkedIn, Twitter, and every other social media platform where board office workers congregate to judge other people's mistakes. The headline alone was a masterpiece. When birthdays become evidence, a marketing director's guide to ending your career in one Instagram post. I actually laughed out loud when I first saw it. Sitting in my office with my morning coffee, scrolling through my phone, and discovering that my wife had become internet famous for all the wrong reasons. The article itself was even better, written with the kind of savage professionalism that only comes from someone who really understands corporate culture and knows exactly where to stick the knife for maximum damage. In what can only be described as a masterclass in career self-destruction, the article began, Marketing Director Camille Harper threw herself a birthday party that will likely be studied in business school ethics classes for years to come. The event, which featured champagne fountains and enough Instagram content to fill a small database, might have been just another excessive millennial celebration if not for one tiny detail. Harper decided to publicly toast her boss, Grant Whitmore, as her most special guest approximately 48 hours before Whitmore's company became the subject of a legal investigation into financial misconduct. Coincidence? Perhaps professional suicide? Absolutely. It got worse from there. The article dissected every aspect of the party, from the timing to the guest list to the truly unfortunate optics of a married woman usively praising her married boss while her husband stood in the background looking like he wanted to die. There were quotes from anonymous industry insiders talking about how everyone at Whitmore and Associates had known about the special relationship between Camille and Grant. How it had been an open secret that made everyone uncomfortable but nobody wanted to address because Grant signed the paychecks. There were breakdowns of professional ethics standards, citations of HR policies, even a helpful sidebar titled 5 Signs Your Work Relationship Has Crossed a Line with photos from the party illustrating each point. LinkedIn erupted. That was the only word for it. Erupted like a volcano of professional judgment and performative outrage. Marketing professionals Camille had never met were writing think pieces about boundary violations. HR representatives were sharing the article with commentary about what not to do if you value your career. Her former colleagues, well, current colleagues technically though probably not for long, were conspicuously silent, not commenting, not defending her, just quietly unliking and unfollowing her profile like she'd contracted a contagious disease they didn't want to catch. The meme started around Wednesday. Someone created a most special guest template with Grant's face photoshopped onto various inappropriate scenarios. Showing up to funerals, crashing weddings, sitting in on therapy sessions. Another person made a bingo card of corporate red flags with toasting your boss at your birthday party as the free space in the middle. A particularly creative soul edited the Titanic sinking scene with Camille's face on the ship and professional reputation written on the iceberg. The internet, as it tends to do, had taken a genuine disaster and transformed it into entertainment. Even Camille's intern, a 22-year-old kid named Tyler, who wore Supreme hoodies to the office and communicated primarily through memes, got in on the action. He posted a gif of Michael Scott from The Office with the caption, "When your boss's birthday invite turns into an HR investigation," and tagged it with crying, laughing emojis. The kid got 5,000 likes in 3 hours and a reputation as the funniest person at a company that was actively imploding. I actually respected his commitment to the bit. Camille, meanwhile, tried to do what people always do when the internet turns against them. She tried to delete everything. Her Instagram posts from the party disappeared. Her LinkedIn profile got scrubbed of any photos that included Grant. She even tried to get Corporate Confessions to take down the article, threatening legal action for defamation, which just resulted in them posting an update with screenshots of her threatening emails and a new headline. Marketing director threatens blog proves she still doesn't understand how the internet works. She called me during this digital purge, her voice tight with panic and rage. "You ruined my life," she shouted into the phone like I'd personally written the article and forced everyone on LinkedIn to share it. "Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, it's gone. My reputation is destroyed. Nobody will hire me now. This is all your fault." I was at the gym when she called on a treadmill having probably the best workout I'd had in months because stress apparently makes me run faster. "No, darling," I said, not even breathing hard. My tone is casual as if we were discussing the weather. "You did that with good lighting and bad decisions. I just provided the documentation. The internet did the rest. And honestly, they did a better job than I ever could have." That bingo card was particularly inspired. She screamed something incoherent about how I'd betrayed her, how I'd violated her trust, how I was a vindictive who'd orchestrated this entire thing just to hurt her. Then she pivoted to threats. "I'm going to sue you, she declared like she'd just discovered the secret weapon that would solve all her problems. My lawyer says I have grounds for intentional infliction of emotional distress. You deliberately destroyed my career. I actually stopped running for that, stepped off the treadmill, and took a long drink from my water bottle while she continued ranting. Please do, I said when she finally paused for breath. Please, I'm begging you, sue me. Take me to court. Put everything on the public record. We can depose Grant. Get all those midnight texts admitted as evidence. Really air out every detail of your professional mentorship for a judge to examine. And when you lose, because you will lose, I'll bill you for my legal fees, emotional damages, and all the snacks I've been stress eating while watching your career implode. The therapy-grade dark chocolate alone is going to cost you a fortune. Grant showed up at my house the next day looking like he'd just gone 12 rounds with reality and lost every single one. This wasn't the polished sunglasses wearing gift bag carrying corporate peacock who'd strutted into Camille's birthday party like he owned the world. No, this was a man who'd discovered that consequences were real and they had teeth. His eyes were bloodshot red. The kind of red that comes from either crying, drinking, or staring at financial statements that prove you're completely screwed. Possibly all three. His tie was crooked, hanging at an angle that would have made his tailor weep, and his expensive suit looked like he'd slept in it, which he probably had, assuming he'd slept at all. He was breathing like a man who'd just watched his stock portfolio spontaneously combust, heavy and ragged, like his lungs were struggling to process air, and existential dread at the same time. I heard the doorbell ring while I was in the kitchen making my second cup of coffee of the morning, which was quickly becoming my favorite hobby, drinking coffee while watching other people's lives fall apart. It's cheaper than therapy and significantly more entertaining. I glanced at the security camera feed on my phone and almost choked on my Danish when I saw Grant standing on my front porch looking like a before photo in an ad for anxiety medication. This was going to be good. This was going to be really, really good. I briefly considered not answering, just letting him stand out there and marinate in his own panic, but that seemed wasteful. When karma delivers entertainment directly to your doorstep, you don't ignore it. You answer the door with coffee in hand and a smile on your face. I took my time getting to the door, letting him ring the bell twice more, letting him shift his weight from foot to foot like a kid who needs to use the bathroom. When I finally opened it, I didn't say anything. Just stood there sipping my coffee and looking at him with the polite curiosity you'd give a door-to-door salesman trying to sell you something you absolutely don't need. He looked worse up close, like stress had physically aged him about 10 years in the span of a week. There were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of expensive skin care could hide. And his signature slick-back hair was falling forward in a way that made him look less powerful executive and more guy who's been pulling his hair out in a panic. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly. That executive authority he usually carried completely absent. "Where's Camille? I need to talk to her now." He tried to push past me into my house. My house? Not our house? Not his house. Definitely not a place he had any right to enter. But I shifted my weight and blocked the doorway with the casual ease of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Well, good morning to you, too, Grant," I said pleasantly, like we were neighbors having a friendly chat about the weather instead of two men on opposite sides of a professional disaster. "Beautiful day, isn't it? Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot. It's that organic fair trade stuff Camille always insisted on buying. Tastes exactly the same as the cheap stuff, but it costs 3 times as much, so you know it's good." "I don't want your coffee," he shouted loud enough that Mrs. Chun from next door probably heard and was already mentally composing the neighborhood Facebook post about it. "I want Camille. Do you have any idea what you've done? What she's done? The company is falling apart. We're hemorrhaging clients. The board is calling emergency meetings. Lawyers are crawling through every document we've produced in the last 5 years." He stopped breathing hard, his face flushed red with rage and panic and whatever other emotions were fighting for dominance. "This is your fault. You did this." "Did I?" I asked, genuinely curious about his logic. "Because from where I'm standing, I just followed proper legal protocol and disclosed a conflict of interest. Everything that happened after that was just people doing their jobs. Lawyers investigating, clients making business decisions, the internet being the internet. I'm just one guy, Grant. I don't have the power to destroy a company. But you know what does have that power? Fraud. Financial misconduct. Cooking the books while your marketing director publicly celebrates you as her most special guest and creates a paper trail that any first-year law student could follow. That'll do it every time." Camille appeared then, emerging from somewhere inside the house where she'd apparently been hiding or gathering courage or maybe just applying more makeup because she looked camera-ready despite the fact that her entire life was imploding. She was wearing one of those athleisure outfits that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. Like she decided that if she looked put together enough, maybe reality would get confused and leave her alone. "Grant," she said, her voice small and uncertain. "What are you doing here?" He whirled on her like she just admitted to burning down his office building. "What am I doing here? What am I doing here?" His voice went up about 3 octaves, hitting notes I didn't think the human male voice was capable of reaching. "What did you make him do?" "The company's freezing accounts because the legal review found discrepancies, major discrepancies, and now they're saying it's connected to your husband's disclosure. HR's in complete meltdown. Half the staff quit yesterday. Our biggest investor pulled out this morning. The trade publications are writing obituaries for us while we're still technically alive." I leaned against the doorframe, sipping my coffee, watching this unfold with the detached appreciation of someone watching a really good movie. This was better than Netflix. This was better than HBO. This was live-action karma. And I had the best seat in the house. Camille stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her like that would somehow contain this disaster. Or keep me from hearing every word. Spoiler alert, I could still hear everything and I wasn't planning on going anywhere. "Grant, I don't understand," she said, trying that placating tone she used when she was managing difficult clients. "Mason just filed a disclosure. That's standard procedure. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything." He was fully shouting now, hands gesturing wildly. That corporate composure completely shattered. "You posted evidence, Camille. You tagged me in photos. You wrote captions about how I'm your most special guest and your incredible mentor. You created a public record of our relationship right as the company was under legal review. Do you know what that looks like? Do you have any idea how that appears to investigators? They're saying you might have known about the financial issues. They're implying you were involved. That maybe I told you things I shouldn't have. That our special relationship," he made angry air quotes, "compromised the integrity of the company." Camille's face went pale. All that carefully applied makeup suddenly looking like paint on a statue. "But I didn't know anything. I'm in marketing. I don't even have access to the financial systems." "That's not what it looks like," Grant shouted, and I noticed his hands were shaking. "It looks like the CEO and his marketing director were having an inappropriate relationship. And when the company started getting investigated, her husband, a lawyer, conveniently disclosed everything to protect himself while throwing both of us under the bus. I had to give him credit." That was actually a pretty accurate summary, though his use of the word inappropriate was doing a lot of heavy lifting. I cleared my throat from the doorway, drawing both their attention. "I hate to interrupt what seems like a really productive conversation," I said. My tone so dry you could use it to start fires, but I feel like I should clarify something. I didn't throw anyone under any bus. I simply informed my employer that I had a personal connection to a company under review, which is literally required by my employment contract and basic legal ethics. What happened after that? The investigation, the findings, the clients leaving, the internet turning your birthday party into a meme. That's all just consequences of choices you both made. I'm not the villain in this story. I'm just the guy who pulled the fire alarm when I noticed the building was already burning." Camille turned to look at me, and there was something in her expression I'd never seen before. Genuine horror mixed with a dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, she'd massively miscalculated who she was married to. And what he was capable of. "Mason, please," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Please fix this. You know people, you have connections. You can make some calls and explain that this is all a misunderstanding. Fix this." I interrupted, genuinely amused by the audacity. "Camille, sweetheart, I'm a corporate attorney, not a wizard. I can't just wave a magic wand and make fraud investigations disappear. I can't unring bells or unpost Instagram photos or convince the internet to forget about the time you publicly declared your boss your most special guest. But you know what? Even if I could fix this, I wouldn't because I'm on vacation from stupid decisions. Your stupid decisions specifically. I've been enabling them, tolerating them, quietly managing them for 6 years, and I'm done. This is your mess. You made it. You can figure out how to clean it up." Grant took a step toward me and for a second I thought he might actually try to hit me, which would have been hilarious given that he had 50 pounds on me but looked like a stiff breeze would knock him over at this point. "You self-righteous son of a," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "You destroyed everything. My company, my reputation, Camille's career. You destroyed all of it because of what? Jealousy? Revenge? Because your wife paid attention to someone else." I sat down my coffee cup carefully on the little table by the door and looked him dead in the eyes. "No, Grant, you destroyed everything because you couldn't keep your books clean or your hands professional. I just documented it. There's a difference. I smiled then. A real smile, the first genuine one I'd felt in weeks. But please keep yelling at me. Mrs. Chin next door has probably already got her phone out. This will make excellent content for the Neighborhood Watch Facebook group. Grant stood there for another moment, breathing hard, his face cycling through about 15 different emotions before landing on defeat. "You've destroyed everything," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Everything I built, everything I worked for, it's gone. And for what? A birthday party? Some Instagram posts." He turned to Camille and I almost felt bad for her when I saw the look he gave her. Almost. "This is your fault. You and your need for attention, your need to broadcast everything, to make everything about you. I hope it was worth it." Then he left, stumbling down my porch steps like a drunk man, getting into his overpriced luxury sedan and driving away without looking back. I watched him go, then looked at Camille, who was standing there with tears running down her face, mascara starting to run, her carefully constructed appearance finally cracking. I wanted to clap. I wanted to give a standing ovation. 5 stars. Would watch again. Absolutely worth the price of admission. Camille thought things couldn't get worse after Grant's meltdown on my front porch, which just proves that optimism is basically a form of denial with better PR because things absolutely got worse. So much worse, like exponentially, catastrophically. Maybe I should fake my own death and start a new life in a country with no extradition treaty worse. And it all started with an article because of course it did, because we live in an age where your entire existence can be dismantled by someone with a laptop, an opinion, and a decent Wi-Fi connection. The headline appeared on a business news website called Corporate Insider, which isn't quite as prestigious as the Wall Street Journal, but carries way more weight in the world of office gossip and professional schadenfreude. Marketing director accused of ethics breach over birthday affair. That was the headline. And let me tell you, it was a masterpiece of strategic word choice. Not involved in or connected to. No, they went with accused of, which carries just enough legal weight to sound serious without being actionable. And that word affair sitting right there at the end, doing double duty as both a reference to the birthday party incident and a sly implication about what might have been going on between Camille and Grant. Brilliant. Billy, whoever wrote that headline deserved a raise and probably got one based on the traffic that article generated. The article itself was everywhere within hours. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, even TikTok, where someone had made a dramatic reading of the key passages over footage of sinking ships and exploding buildings. Her photo was plastered across social media. That specific photo from the birthday party where she's raising her champagne glass toward Grant, her smile bright enough to power a small city, her hand extended toward him in what the article described as a gesture of intimate familiarity inappropriate for a professional relationship. The photo was cropped, zoomed, enhanced, and analyzed like it was the Zapruder film of corporate misconduct. People were counting the distance between her and Grant, measuring the angle of her smile, debating whether that was just professional admiration in her eyes or something significantly less appropriate. LinkedIn absolutely roasted her. And if you've never witnessed a LinkedIn roasting, let me tell you, it's a special kind of brutal. Because LinkedIn users don't just criticize, they criticize while simultaneously humble bragging about their own superior ethics and professional judgment. It's like getting kicked while you're down, except the person kicking you is also handing out their business card and asking if you've considered their leadership coaching services. The comment section under that article was basically a masterclass in professional passive aggression disguised as concern. One comment that got over 3,000 likes read, "Bold of her to mix work and wine like they're ingredients in a recipe for disaster. Must be networking 2.0. As someone who spent 15 years building authentic professional relationships based on mutual respect and clear boundaries, I find this deeply troubling. #leadership #ethics #professional development. The hashtags were the chef's kiss on that particular burn. Really driving home that this person wasn't just judging Camille. They were using her downfall as content for their personal brand. Another gem. I've always maintained that your reputation is your currency in this industry. This situation is a perfect case study in how quickly that currency can become worthless. In my upcoming webinar, Boundaries, the Key to Professional Success, we'll be discussing exactly these kinds of scenarios. Link in bio #career advice #professional boundaries #thoughtful leadership. I actually laughed at that one, sitting in my home office with my coffee, watching Camille's professional reputation get commodified into marketing material for someone's coaching business. The internet is a beautiful, terrible place. Even her in turn, that kid Tyler with the Supreme hoodies, got in on the action, and his post might have been my favorite of all. He posted a meme featuring Michael Scott from The Office looking confused with the caption, "When your boss's birthday invite turns into an HR investigation," accompanied by 3 crying laughing emojis, and a skull emoji for good measure. The kid got 5,000 likes in the first 3 hours, 1,500 comments ranging from "dead skull" to "this is why I love Gen Z," and a reputation boost that probably positioned him nicely for his next job interview. Someone in the comments offered him an internship on the spot. Another person asked if he was available for freelance social media management. The kid had turned his boss's downfall into a career opportunity, which was either incredibly savvy or morally questionable, depending on your perspective. Personally, I thought it was hilarious and sent him a connection request. The memes multiplied like rabbits on energy drinks. Someone created an inappropriate work relationship starter pack featuring a champagne glass, a red dress, sunglasses worn indoors, and a screenshot of Camille's most special guest toast. Another person made one of those corporate bingo cards where the free space in the middle said, "Publicly praising your boss at your birthday party," and the surrounding squares included gems like midnight text from CEO claiming its mentorship, spouse walks out mid-party and company under investigation. I saw at least 15 different variations of the "is this a butterfly" meme with someone pointing at a photo of Grant and asking, "is this professional development?" Twitter was somehow even worse because Twitter users have mastered the art of being devastating in under 280 characters. Imagine ending your career over birthday cake. Couldn't be me. That one got 20,000 likes. She really said, "Let me destroy my marriage, my job, and my reputation in one toast." And then actually did it. Icon behavior. Honestly, 15,000 retweets. The way she tagged him most special guest like she was accepting an Oscar for worst professional judgment. 10,000 likes and 300 quote tweets. Each one more brutal than the last. Someone made a TikTok video with that "Oh No" song playing over a slideshow of photos from the party. Zooming in on Mason. That's me. Hi. Standing in the background of various shots looking progressively more dead inside. The caption read, "POV, you're watching your marriage end in real time, but the appetizers are really good, so you stay." It got 2 million views in 36 hours and spawned approximately 400 duet videos of people recreating my exact facial expression. I became a meme without even trying, which is either the height of modern fame or a sign that society has completely lost the plot. Probably both. Camille tried everything to stop the bleeding, which only made it worse because the internet never forgets and it absolutely hates when you try to make it forget. She started by deleting the original Instagram posts from the party, which was cute, but pointless since approximately 300 people had already screenshot them. Those screenshots were now circulating with watermarks and red circles and arrows pointing to every questionable detail. She scrubbed her LinkedIn profile of any photos that included Grant. But someone had archived her entire profile history and posted a before and after comparison with the caption, "The internet remembers a photo essay." She changed her privacy settings on every social media platform. But by then, her accounts had been screenshotted, her posts had been archived, and her digital footprint was preserved for posterity, whether she liked it or not. Then she made the classic mistake that everyone makes when the internet turns against them. She tried to fight back. She posted a statement on LinkedIn against my advice, not that she asked for it, explaining that the party had been a celebration with colleagues and that any implication of impropriety is completely unfounded and hurtful. The post was professional, measured, carefully worded to avoid admitting anything while also attempting to sound reasonable and victimized. It might have worked in a different context, maybe even 5 years ago before social media turned everyone into an amateur prosecutor. But in 2025, posting a defensive statement when the internet has already decided you're guilty is like throwing gasoline on a fire and expecting it to help. The comments started immediately. "So, calling your boss your most special guest is just colleague things. Good to know. The impropriety isn't implied. It's explicitly documented in approximately 50 Instagram posts. Ma'am, this is a Wendy's." That last one didn't even make sense in context, but got 800 likes anyway because internet humor operates on its own logic. Her former colleagues maintained radio silence, which spoke volumes in that specifically corporate way where not saying anything says everything. Nobody defended her. Nobody vouched for her character. Nobody posted supportive comments or tried to contextualize the situation. They just quietly unliked her posts, disconnected from her on LinkedIn, and pretended they'd never known her well enough to comment. It was the professional equivalent of watching someone drown from the shore and deciding that getting wet wouldn't be a good career move. Brutal, but understandable. Nobody wanted to tie themselves to a sinking ship, especially not when that ship was actively being mead into oblivion. The trade publications picked up the story next because apparently Camille's downfall was newsworthy enough to merit actual journalism. Marketing Week ran a piece titled "When Personal Branding Goes Wrong, Lessons from the Whitmore Scandal." Adage did a feature on the blurred lines between mentorship and misconduct. Even Forbes got in on the action with an article about the hidden costs of workplace relationships that used Camille's situation as the lead example. She'd become a cautionary tale, a teaching moment, a case study in what not to do if you value your career or your sanity or your ability to show your face in professional settings ever again. I watched all of this unfold from the comfort of my home office, my sanctuary, my front row seat to Karma's greatest hits. Camille would come storming in periodically, her phone clutched in her hand like it was a weapon or a lifeline or maybe both, showing me the latest article or meme or comment thread like I was supposed to do something about it. "Look at this," she'd shout, shoving her phone in my face. "They're calling me birthday cake Barbie. There's a whole hashtag. Mason, you have to make this stop." But I couldn't make it stop. And honestly, I wouldn't have even if I could. This wasn't my doing anymore. This was the internet being the internet. This was consequences having consequences. This was the natural result of making spectacularly bad decisions in an age where everything is documented, shared, and preserved forever. Sorry, sweetheart. I'd say not sorry at all. I'm fresh out of magic wands and the genie is not taking my calls. Maybe try apologizing to the internet. I hear that always works great and definitely never makes things worse. She tried that too, eventually posting a more comprehensive apology that acknowledged poor judgment and regrettable optics while stopping just short of admitting to anything actually actionable. It got ratioed, which means more people commented negatively than liked it within 20 minutes. And someone made a bingo card of corporate apology cliches with her post hitting basically every square. Camille showed up to work on Monday morning like she was about to fix the Titanic with duct tape and sheer determination. I wasn't there to witness it personally, but I got the full report later from Tyler, the intern who'd meet her into oblivion and apparently felt guilty enough to send me a detailed play-by-play. According to his eyewitness account, she walked into the Whitmore and Associates building wearing her best power suit, the navy one she'd bought specifically for difficult client meetings. Her hair blown out to perfection, her makeup applied with the precision of someone going into battle. She looked ready to fight, ready to negotiate, ready to somehow salvage her career from the burning wreckage of the last 2 weeks. Her security badge didn't work. She swiped it once at the entrance turnstile. Got a red light and an angry beep. Swiped it again. Same result. The security guard, a guy named Marcus, who'd seen her come and go for 3 years, wouldn't make eye contact, just handed her a sealed manila envelope with her name printed across the front in that impersonal corporate font that screams, "Your life is about to get worse." She apparently stood there for a solid 30 seconds, staring at that envelope like it might spontaneously combust if she looked at it hard enough before finally opening it with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, not multiple pages of explanation or justification or carefully worded corporate doublespeak. Just one clean, brutal sentence. Termination of employment effective immediately. And there at the bottom, right above the company seal and the HR director's signature, was another name. A name that made her face go pale, made her knees literally buckle, according to Tyler's dramatic retelling. Authorized by General Counsel Mason R. Hale. She looked up from the paper, blinking like the letters might rearrange themselves into something different, something less devastating, something that didn't confirm her worst suspicion. "You," she whispered, though I wasn't there to hear it. "You did this," Tyler said. The security guard offered her a tissue box. Marcus, the real MVP of this story, apparently kept emergency tissues at his desk specifically for moments like this. Camille didn't take one. She just stood there staring at my signature, probably realizing that her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, had just fired her using nothing but proper legal channels and perfectly executed revenge. I offered her silence. It was the kindest thing I could give. That night, Camille came home well to my house since calling it home implied she still belonged there and found me packing my suitcase. Not frantically, not emotionally, just methodically folding clothes and placing them in neat rows like I was preparing for a business trip that happened to be permanent. She stood in the doorway, mascara stir, pride shattered. "We can fix this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I handed her the divorce papers I'd been saving for exactly this moment. "Perfectly drafted, perfectly timed. You already fixed it for me." As I walked past her, rolling my suitcase toward freedom, the doorbell rang. Excellent timing as always. A courier stood there holding an official-looking envelope, which he handed directly to Camille. She opened it with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the document before her knees gave out entirely. Legal notice. Repayment of performance bonuses totaling $130,000. Issued based on fraudulent company earnings under Grant Whitmore's direction. Due immediately. I stepped over her literally and walked to my car without looking back. No screaming, no dramatic speeches, no movie-worthy confrontations, just peace. Because some men destroy you with rage and violence and public spectacles. I prefer invoices and silence.